etc. I would say, isn't it also because of a gender and insecurity because of a gender? That's for Professor Chakraborty. It was a very, very interesting presentation. Going on to what Professor Shangyukta Bhattacharya said, the participation of women in the decision-making process with a focus on the USA. I said the topics really linked up. Professor Chakraborty was speaking of an individual powerful woman. From there, we have moved on to a wider participation of women in the decision-making process in the parliamentary systems, which has been very minutely analyzed by Professor Bhattacharya. She has given us a lot of very interesting data, very interesting analysis from multiple dimensions. From there, we move on to Professor Reddy's analysis, which really locates the other discussions in the wider setting. The society. We cannot forget the society and how women's disempowerment, women's marginalization is embedded in society, and that needs to be examined not only in the wider social system, but in the wider context of time, history, that is, in terms of time and space. I think it has been an excellent presentation reminding us how we need to look at women's oppression, not just in terms of the political, but in the wider social context, and how empowerment needs not to be taken at the level of institutions, but at the level of wider social system from the women's childhood days. Thank you very much to all the paper presenters for your excellent presentations. I have been greatly enriched by your presentations, and I thank all the participants for your very active participation. Thank you very much, and we declare this session closed.
Thank you, Professor Devi.
The organizers would now take over. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you, our resource persons. Thank you very much. Thank you. We now move on to the next session. Mr. Kannan Roy, can you please announce the start of the next session? We'll then take over. Yes.
Hello. Hello.
At the very outset, I welcome you all for joining this webinar today. We have four speakers in this session. I am requesting Dr. Tilottama Mukherjee to introduce us about this.
Thank you, ma'am. Let me first introduce Dr. Maitri Bardhan Roy, our first invited paper presenter in this session. Dr. Roy is UGC Emeritus Professor. She was former Principal Bashanti Devi College, ICSSR Senior Research Fellow in IDSK, and also performing research in Diamond Harbour Women's University. Presently, she is absorbed in Adams University, Department of Political Science, as professor in School of Liberal Arts and Cultural Studies. She has been invited in several national and international seminars. As an invited speaker, she has presented her deliberations. She was the keynote speaker in the World Women's Congress at Bengaluru on 8 September 2019. She was an invited speaker in Vietnam Sociological Association Conference in October 2019. She was an invited speaker in International Conference on Livelihood Diversity, the coastal region of the South 24 Parganas in West Bengal, organized by Diamond Harbour Women's University and sponsored by National Commission for Women, New Delhi, on 6th and 7th March 2020. She has published widely in national and international peer-reviewed journals, edited volumes, and has co-authored books. She is an ICSSR Project Fellow at Institute of Development Studies, Kolkata, Coordinator, Department of Women's Studies between 2018 and 2020 on the topic Assessment of Health and Nutritional Status of the Educated Women, Students under Reserved Category in the Coastal Region of South 24 Parganas, enrolled in highest university degree. She was recently awarded the ICSSR Collegium Eminent Social Sciences Award in June 2020. Over to you, ma'am.
Okay. As per our list, our first speaker is Dr. Maitri Bardhan Roy. She will enlighten us through her paper Politics and Endowments, Concepts and Prospects, Yesterday, Today and Tomorrow. I am inviting her to put forward her views. I also request all the speakers to be brief and precise due to scarcity of time, due to time problem. Okay, please, madam, proceed.
Thank you very much for inviting. Thank you, Tilottama, for inviting me for.
My pleasure, ma'am. My pleasure.
And also, thank you, the chairperson, for allowing me to initiate my discussion on politics and women, constraints and prospects, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. Actually, it is a very big topic, it seems, covering a large area, but still to discuss, instead of going to the tomorrow or today's concept, if I don't mention the yesterday's concept, it would be difficult for us to understand that how the women has been involved in politics and what are the means through which, what are the constraints the women have to face in everyday's life for participating in politics or becoming a part of the politics. So if we define politics, if the concept politics itself is associated with the concept of citizenship, so it is concerning the rights of the people too, and or rights of the women too. So whenever we speak, so from the ancient period itself, if we look to the period of 385 BC, when Aristotle was one of the leading political philosopher in Greece, he was a person who initiated the separate world where the women were excluded in participation because, according to him, those who are earning, that means those who has got the ownership right or property right, they are only the person who can intervene in the administrative structure because their monetary condition will only allow them to take part and they take part in the management of the affairs. So he was the first person who spoke about the exclusion of women from the political field. Now, followed by him, there are certain political philosophers also commented on the same, and women stayed out of the political scenario because of their concept about women or ideas about women. Now, Aristotle's political philosophy was also supported by another political philosopher named Machiavelli, who at the gateway of the medieval period also proposed that the women cannot be the citizens because they are unable to earn money and they have a separate domain of their own, and that's why they should take care of their children and they should stay away from external affairs or intervening in the administration or the management of the affairs of the state. Now, I must mention here that Machiavelli was born in the year 1469 and till 1527 he died in 1527. So you can better understand that what was the situation of the period during this when Machiavelli was born. It was a transition period and it was moving towards the medieval period or medieval or democratic stature of the society, because we were moving towards a parliamentary system of government then. Now, however, we must mention here that whenever we came to the medieval period, it became evident that the people, the male members of the society were not at all ready to allow the women to enter into the politics. And so we have to start, if we start from British or European culture, we will see that during the Victorian period, the women were considered as angel women. If they have so many children, they give birth of many children, and that was encouraged by Queen Victoria, who gave birth of more than 9 children for showing that she is one of the husband's most favorite women or wife, and this should be the structure of the society. So the period was not only considered as a patriarchal family, a patriarchal period, but also at the same time the women as the agent of patriarchy were also promoting the same, and they were not in favor of, they themselves also realized that the women should be involved in taking care of household affairs, and they should not be given an opportunity to enter into the political field. But suddenly, in the year 1830, there was a demand from the women that the voting right should be initiated, and it continued to them. In 1870, that voting right, demand for voting right became a national movement. And in 1903, the voting bill was rejected, and it resulted in the development of the violent movement in Europe, where the women started breaking or started throwing out everything for as a gesture of non-cooperation with the government of the country. Interestingly, I must mention here that during the time to console these women in Europe, the first provision was made to give them an opportunity to give vote to the municipal corporation election. We must remember this. I will come to the same scenario whenever I would speak about the Indian system, Indian reservation policies also. This is very important. This is the landmark of the initiation of certain initiation of a gesture to give something, satisfy the women by giving something which is below standard. But interestingly, the European women of Britain refused to accept this, and the demand continued. And in the year 1920, they were compelled to give the right to vote ultimately, because the irresistible objections of the women compelled them to compel the government to entrust the responsibility to them to give vote. Now, same manner, throughout Europe, the same scenario we could see. In 1848, it was electoral law which was passed in Hungary. In 1907, Austrian half in Habsburg Empire gave the electoral law in 1865. It is in Italy, 1866 in Sweden, 1887 in Netherlands, all of which explicitly excluded the women to vote altogether. But the thing is that the demand, with the upcoming of the British system of voting right, British women gaining voting right, little by little, all these nations had to promote for the entrusting voting right to the people, to their women. In France also, during the France Revolution, women were given the right to participate in the debate, but in the similar manner in 1793, the women clubs were banned, and this discontent gender participation, but literally it indicated main rights only. So when this scenario was like that throughout Europe, there was a demand and counter objection from the government to entrust them the responsibility of giving vote. The condition of America was also the same. The American movement started in 1848, and again it ended up in 1920. So I must mention here that one after another, following Britain, or the whole of Europe as well as the American continents had to give the right to vote to the women, and 26th August 1920 was recognized as Women's Equality Day. Now, whenever we speak of India's Indian women's voting right, we feel very proud that we have been given that. We won't have to ask for that. Automatically, we have been given the right to vote. But before going to that story of right to vote, we have to mention the early year of independence, that how women little by little participated in the management in the national independence movement. So I must mention here Mahatma Gandhi's opinion. In his opinion, as long as women of India do not take part in public life, there could be no salvation for the country. It would have no user for that kind of Swaraj of which women have not made their full contribution. So we must remember that, and we must thank Mahatma Gandhi for giving an opportunity to the women to take part in the Swaraj movement or Indian War of Independence. So in our country, instead of talking about the political rights of women, we have to mention here that the women have been given an opportunity to participate, or what was the position of women in the national movement, because it is not the political right, it is the nationalist right of the people. That means it is the right of my independence, my own country people, that which was considered important, and the women have been given the right to give vote. For my explanation, why this women have been given the right to give vote and participate in the national movement, because there are certain convenience also associated with this, that the women can be a very good informer, women can be a very good media for keeping or managing the male members in a hiding position or inside the house to protect them. So these are the means, I would say, that which had encouraged the Indian male to prefer the involvement of women in our War of Independence. So I'm not going to details. There are a lot of detailed information regarding this. I can, because of the lack of time, I'm not in a position to discuss all these things. But however, if I come back to the political situation also, my question here is that out of the 248 members of the Constituent Assembly, that means at the time of independence, when we constituted a Constituent Assembly for the purpose of discussing that what should be the Constitution of India or independent India, out of these 248 members, only 21 were women. That means though we have been given the right to vote, we have never been given equality position. And besides that, when the Constituent Assembly was going women took active participation in the decision-making power or the constitution making. But out of this 9 persons also, 3 resigned ultimately, and there was a request from the female members that these 3 who had resigned, they should be filled up, the seats should be filled up by women, and that has not been listened to. And as a result of which, out of 248 members, only 6 participants were there in determining the constitution of India. Now you can very well imagine what was the position of women there. Now, if I speak about Ambedkar's reservation policy, within this reservation policy itself also, Ambedkar was talking about the rights of reservation of women, because they were also considered as one of the backward part of the country. But interestingly, Ambedkar was listened to in case of the caste reservation. In case of women reservation, he was totally discarded, and he was not in a position to add these as a part of the policy of government of India. Now, whenever independent India talk about the equal right of women to elect and to be elected. So how much we have got the right to elect, but do you have really the right to be elected? Now, political participation implies, so now elected. So this is the question. Now next is that, what is a political participation? We should have a clear idea about what is political participation. That means it is the voluntary activities of all members of the society to share in the selection of rulers, directly and indirectly in the formulation of public policy. So we have been given the right to share the selection of ruler, but directly or indirectly, we were not given the authority to formulate the public policy, because only 9 persons cannot formulate the public policy, which was mainly based on the decision of the 242 persons. Now, so if I consider this as one of the, and secondly, if I look to another concept, Verwey and Pai, who grouped 4 broad mode of participation. One is voting, campaign activity, cooperative activity, and citizen initiated contact. Now there also participation is not there. Then Sonfeld mentioned 10 types of activities: running for or holding public or party offices, belonging to a party or other political organization, working in an election, attending political meeting or rallies, making financial contribution to a party or candidate, contracting public official, publicity, expressing a political opinion to convince others, and partaking in political discussion, voting and exposing oneself to political stimuli. But in a election, participation in election, the term participation in election has been totally evaded out from that concept or that definition. Now, whenever we speak about the emancipation of women, we come to look into the 3 directions to make necessary laws for social reform. Number 1. Number 2, maximize opportunities for their education. And number 3, provide them with fundamental political rights. Attention was concentrated at the political rights of women, got attention only during the last phase of independent movement. That means we have made necessary laws and reform. Many laws have been made, many reforms have been made, though the implementation question is still a question mark. Now, maximize the opportunities of their education, it is true, but still there are a lot of people who have not seen the light of education staying within the country itself, which is the highest democratic country of the world. To provide them with the fundamental political right. What political right we have? We have got the right to give vote. If I ask that I should be given the right to be elected. Nobody is ready to do that. Now, if I say, if I refer to Karl Marx, that democracy is a beautiful facade to keep the people away from the seat of power. That means if I say that, I should be given a seat to, or give the authority to power, take part in the power. In a very polite and a very decent way, I am opposed participation in the administration, and because I am a woman. Now, UN Convention also talked about elimination of all forms of discrimination against women, which has come into being in 1979, and they also talked about the right to vote in all aspects of life, but their right to participate in the formulation and implementation of governmental policies, right to participate in the non-governmental and socio-political organization, all this has come into being. But discrimination against women says that this deep-rooted structure of the society in the roles women play and in a sexual division of labor which restricted female primarily to the domestic spheres of life. Therefore, it is argued that only substantial social changes capable of demolishing the structural basis regarding the traditional views of male-dominated system, but still women has not come to the forefront. Now, if we look to the electoral position of women or representation of women, we would see that we should get 50% of being the 50% population of the country. But in 1957, it was only 4.45%, and it went one or fraction of 1% high. Like that, it has come to 14.6% in 2019. That means out of the 538 or 548 persons in the Lok Sabha, we have only 78 seats. Do we think that we are represented properly under a strong democratic country like India? We have no representation. We have no decision-making power. Then where do we stand? It is currently where do you stand? We have no standing at all in the political features. But still, in this condition, in this exploitative condition also, some people have been able to come to the forefront. Among them, we must remember Indira Gandhi, we must remember Nandini Shapati, we must remember Chief Minister Jayalalitha, we must remember Mayawati in Uttar Pradesh, and Mamata Banerjee, the Chief Minister of West Bengal, who had been fighting for their existence. And in case of Mamata Banerjee, we must remember that after 34 years of communist domination, she could break the ice and should come to power as one of the single lady. So her example is an example to establish that if the women power is strong enough to fight back the authority, she can break everything, and thus women can come to the forefront at any moment. And why it is essential that these ladies should come to the forefront? Because they can think about the welfare of the women community. Otherwise, the women community, the needs of the women community will never be represented. Now, there recently also, we see, and without naming, I would say that there are certain other ladies who are also making a mark in Indian politics, but the intensity of the fight they have to give for coming to power is, we cannot imagine even, is beyond imagination. Because I was there in the UNDF project, which was talking about the participation, 50%, 33 and 1/3% participation of women. As I have mentioned earlier, that in that case also the same history is repeated in India, because it has been seen that the women had been given the right to give vote in all the country, all the lower level administration. That means we got the right to give vote, or we get our representation in the municipal corporation. Our representation is there in the panchayat level. Our representation is there in the village panchayat level. Everywhere we are being represented. But where is the 33 and 1/3% for the state legislative assembly? Where is 33 and 1% for the parliament? This has not been given. The same history of European culture has been repeated here, that the municipal corporation has been given the right to give vote, right to representation. But we have accepted this. British women did not accept this, and their fight continued, but we have accepted this. Now, in our UNDF project, we have seen that even the women themselves are also not interested to come to the forefront, because 40 political party women we have interviewed. Everybody says that we are happy to a position what we have been given now. And I don't want to go beyond that. I don't want to fight for my higher position in the political party participation. Now, those who are in the forefront, if they say like that, it is difficult for the people to find out the means to bring the women to the forefront, because most of the cases are the lacks are within the women themselves. Now, a political leader very nicely during this UNDF project had explained, he is known to us, I am not naming him, he was of opinion that if you want to come to the forefront, come to power, you should have a coterie of your own. And you should always move together, try to create the coterie, manage the coterie in such a way that they should every time talk about you and try to bring you to the forefront. If that coterie exists, it would be easier for you to come to the forefront. And beyond this, in his opinion, so if we want to remove women out of the scenario, then we can do one thing. We can scandalize her. If we scandalize her, immediately she will never feel like come to the forefront. And so the women, if you want to come, women wants to come to the forefront, she should be a thick-skinned person, because scandalization would be there. So these are the issues that maybe sometimes keep the women away from the political position, but it is high time that if we don't come and capture to the power, bring 50% representation, the women's position will remain the same as it is nowadays. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Very interesting and informative lecture from you. You have explained the very precise about women and politics related views and in chronological views, I think, and you highlighted the views of liberal political philosophers who, in spite of their liberal views, were influenced by patriarchy. Amazing views, and I think it is. I am giving thanks to you again, and I am asking Professor Tilottama Mukherjee, Dr. Tilottama Mukherjee, to invite the questions, as it is already.
Madam, am I audible?
2:20.
Am I audible?
Okay.
Ma'am,
Yes.
let us first complete all the lectures. Let us hear all the lectures first. We'll take the question answers at the end of the session. Okay? Let us
Okay.
now request Dr. Sonu Trivedi, Madam, to give her lecture. Kindly allow me a couple of minutes to introduce her. She is Director, Indian Cultural Center at Embassy of India in Seoul. She joined as Assistant Professor Zakir Hussain, Delhi College, University of Delhi in 2006. Before moving to the diplomatic assignment at Seoul, She was a fellow at Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, New Delhi. She was also a visiting fellow at Institute of Asia Pacific Studies, Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, Beijing in 2011. She was member of Myanmar Core Group at Indian Council of World Affairs in 2014 and a visiting faculty of IIM Indore. She was also the convener at Southeast Asia Research Group in the Department of Political Science, University of Delhi, and founder director of Center for Vietnam Studies, New Delhi. Her book, Transition from Authoritarianism to Democracy, Comparative Study of Indonesia and Myanmar, was published in 2015, and her latest work on democratization in Myanmar, Progress and Prospects, was published in 2018. She has also co-edited a book titled Emerging Horizons in India-Vietnam Relations. Over to you, Sonu ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Tilokma, and a warm, I can say that a very good evening to all from Seoul. It's already going to be 6 here. And first of all, let me congratulate the organizers, both the Syama Prasad College and Malda College, for organizing this online conference on women in politics. And let's not waste too much of time, and because already we are running short of time and we are very running behind the schedule. So let me directly come to the theme of my presentation. I will be focusing on gender equality, the South Korean experience. And since we all know that this is an informed audience, we have senior professors and students and senior researchers participating. So let me quickly begin. And I would just like to share here that as a student and teacher, and now somebody who is practicing public administration, when I look at public administration through the lens of gender, its public dimensions are revealed as gendered rather than neutral. Public administration involves discretionary exercise of public power, which is grounded in a historical understanding of the public sphere as a male preserve, distinct from domestic realm that has been the primary life space and responsibility of women. Both in theory and practice, the household, including the bearing and nurturing of children, has been seen as private. Something which is not political is not of public interest. This is the common belief. Throughout history, women have been expected to handle needs related to sustenance and nurturance in order that men could have time and energy for public pursuits. This division of labor persists even today, despite equal opportunities and affirmative action policies, which have simply enabled women to shoulder both household and paid work rather than to share them equally with men, and despite recommendations for shared parenting. Like all other public sector activities, public administration is structurally masculine, despite its apparent neutrality and despite the presence of increasing number of women in central, state, and local governments. It is a known fact that subordination of women through their assignments to a set of duties that, no matter how necessary, are generally regarded as less significant. It also limits the opportunities to participate in public life and time and energy they have to devote to. In public sphere, women are treated as citizens, but in reality, their participation in public life has been restricted practically by the demands of their household duties. And in fact, these are some of the paradoxes that I would like to focus here, and taking examples from the South Korean experience. And one very important thinker that I would like to quote here is Camilla Stevers. Camilla Stevers, in her book Gender Images in Public Administration, talks about how women are on tap but not on top. So I'm just trying to explain and apply this aspect of what Camilla Stevers has talked about, women being at the top but not on top in the South Korean case. And before applying these parameters, let me briefly give you some of the provisions from the Constitution of Republic of Korea. The Constitution, which was enacted in 1948, and it was last amended in 1987, has in itself, in the preamble itself, it is mentioned that it says that to afford equal opportunities to every person. And then Article 32, Clause 4 of Article 32 says special protection shall be accorded to working women, and they shall not be subjected to unjust discrimination in terms of employment, wages, and working conditions. And Article 34(3) of the Constitution says the state shall endeavor to promote welfare and rights of women. And since the women's suffrage in Republic of Korea in 1948 and the election of the first female legislator the next year, the share of women in National Assembly has grown steadily and slowly. And if we take the example of the recent general election, which took place in April 2020 amidst this COVID pandemic, we see that 57 women were elected, which constitutes 19% of the 300 seats in parliament, though it is not very good. But still, slowly from 1948, we have seen that gradually the number of elected women in parliament has increased. And also as a welcome move, we see this year, in March 2020, formation of South Korea's first women party, and this was formed on the occasion of the International Women's Day on 8th of March. The party platform addresses issues such as gender equality in political representation, gender-based violence, socioeconomic discrimination against women, intersectionality, and climate change-related issues. Though the party could not even win even a single seat in the parliament, but it was a good beginning. And in recent times, the party has set up a campaign school to train women candidates for the upcoming local and provincial elections in 2022. And another example which I would like to give here is in April 2019, the Constitutional Court overturned a 67-year-old ban that denied abortion in South Korea. The court ordered it has ordered the parliament to revise the abortion law by the end of 2020. So by the end of this year, we expect a new law to come up. And these were related to the constitutional provisions and some of the laws. And now coming to the policies. One of the most important policies which focuses on gender equality in South Korea is the Framework Act on Women's Development, which was enacted in 1995. But later this was revised, and in 2014, it was revised, amended, and a new name was given, which is called as Framework Act on Gender Equality. And this revised act took effect from July 2015. The purpose of this act is to realize gender equality in all areas such as politics, economy, society, and culture by providing for basic matters with regard to the obligation of the state and local governments to implement the principle of gender equality under the Constitution of Republic of Korea. And according to the Article 7 of the Act, which is supposed to be very important, the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family is responsible for formulating a master plan for gender equality related policy for every 5 years. So this is something which is different we find from the Indian case, where only one particular ministry, the Gender Equality and Family Ministry, is responsible for making a master plan for gender equality. And further, the Framework Act on Gender Equality has a great significance in bringing gender equality culture through instituting a system of consideration of policy impacts on women, their welfare, education, gender equal families, and family-friendly cities. So these are very unique concepts which have been incorporated in this act. And it also focuses on international cooperation for realizing gender equality and a family policy strategy for participation in ways that in the process of men and women should equally participate. And further, the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family is actually in fact responsible for implementing these policies. And though it is not very old, it was established as an independent ministry in 2001. but it has been focusing on ways of ensuring how people could work towards gender equality. And then there are several laws which were passed. I would just like to give a brief mention to all of them. Since mid-1980s, in areas of society, including politics, economics, family, various institutions, laws and policies have set up the basis to eliminate discrimination against women and achieve gender equality. And some of these acts are, the first one which I would like to mention is the Act on Equal Employment Care Act, enacted in 1991. Then we have the law on maternity protection, which was passed in 2001, revised and again amended in 2001. The Act on Special Cases concerning the punishment of sexual crimes, which was passed in 1994. Then the Act on Special Cases concerning the punishment of crimes of domestic violence, which was passed in 1997. The Act on Prevention of Sexual Traffic and Protection of Victims, passed in 2004. All these were enacted to improve efforts to create an environment where both men and women can enjoy a work-life balance, flourished with the enactment of equal employment opportunity and Work-Family Balance Assistance Act. The other act is about the promotion of creation of a family-friendly social environment, and the Act on Promotion of Economic Activities of Career-Interrupted Women. These are some of the examples I thought maybe I should just cite them, just to make all the participants aware about the women-friendly laws which are there in South Korea. Furthermore, there have been continuous efforts to reflect gender perspectives in general policy making by the Ministry of Gender Equality and many other central government ministries, such as by introducing the Gender Impact Assessment Act, which was passed in 2004, gender budget statements and gender budget balance sheets, which began from 2009. And currently, the current government allocation is 6.2% so far as the gender budgeting in Republic of Korea is concerned. Then let me also briefly give you some of the other examples. Like one example is about the Best Family Friendly Management certification. So companies are given this certification by the government if they follow certain practices and certain principles which are outlined by the government, then they get this certification. Then the government is following 2-track support policy for paternity leave, like after the female worker, where like once she has availed the maternity leave, and during that period, if the father wants to avail the paternity leave, then compensation is given and full paid leave is given. Along with that, during that period, when the spouse goes on leave, in the second track, it also provides financial support to the company to hire somebody as a replacement, which we do not have in India. When female goes on maternity leave, somebody is hired, but when the father goes on paternity leave, when the male staff goes on paternity leave, then financial compensation is not given, where somebody else is hired. So this is one. These are some of the lessons that can be learned from the South Korean experience. Then also there is a task force which has been formed by the ministry, and the main focus of this task force is to work on gender parity and empowerment of women. Then there are a number of other policies, but quickly just let me just highlight the 4 R's which the government is following here to narrow the gender gap and ensure women get same opportunities as men. They are focusing on 4 R's, which are recruitment, retention, restart, and women representation for women. At the same time, considering how a woman's life takes shape. In Korea, and I'm sure this is a common feature world over, when women first enters the workforce, they tend to do well. But as soon as they have children, many women leave the labor market. When they are ready to return they find their opportunities are limited and prospects for promotion are low. This is a common feature world over. So here, the task force plans to get more women into workplace and help them become managers. And the Ministry of Gender Equality and Family has two policies in support of this. The first one is that they have set up Women's Resource Academy, which aims to increase the number of female managers. It helps women recognize their areas for improvement and teach them how to do so through customized training such as role plays and group discussion. And the second one is Women's Resource Database, which matches qualified female candidates with appropriate jobs. Women who have the right qualification and skills are registered in the database and then recommended as candidates for various government committees or public organizations. Since last couple of years, state-run enterprises have been forced to record the gender ratio of job applicants and to ensure that they are not discriminatory. So these are some of the, I started with the constitutional provisions, then the acts, then some of the policy measures that the government is taking. But all these are not enough because the status of women is, even in South Korea, similar to that we have in India. While policy changes are important, a change in societal perception is ultimately key to solving the issue. And so far as the societal imprints are concerned, the South Korean culture remains deeply patriarchal, with women and men expected to fulfill certain roles based on gender. Society is dominated by stereotypes about gender roles. Men are breadwinners and women are responsible for child rearing and housework, a common feature. As similar to India. Politics is particularly, again, unequal. As I gave the example, 19% of the seats in South Korea's parliament are held by women. And so far as the other parameters are concerned, women are less paid than men counterparts at the same level. Generally, they are assigned most of the lower level work. They have trouble fitting into accepted managerial roles, experiences of sexual harassment in organization, working as double shift of job and home responsibilities, not adequately represented proportionately in the top levels of bureaucracy and political positions, again, common features. And let me also give you one of the examples. The World Economic Forum Forum's 2020 report on global gender gap ranks South Korea as 108 out of the 153 countries. So these were some of the, you can say, I focused on the societal imprint and also the ranking. But let me tell you that though despite the myriad hurdles they face, more and more women are speaking out these days in South Korea and forcing the government to take action. This is a part of a wider reckoning with South Korea's patriarchal society that has also seen a number of prominent Me Too cases coming up, and women organizing to fight against sexual abuse at work, illegal spy cameras, photography, and male-defined beauty standards. Young women have shaken up the country's political culture in recent years with campaigns targeting the country's hyper. Heard about the mysterious death of the mayor of Seoul City, and in fact, he is also linked to one of these Me Too movements. So it has become very common, the protests, and women are now coming up. So these are some, you can say, some of the welcome move which are happening, and it is widely covered by the mass media as well as the social media. So, on this note, since we have we are running sort of time, I have flagged some of the issues. Let me end here. And like all developing countries, South Korea is struggling to come out of the patriarchal norms. And to conclude, I would just like to say that the approach should be how to add water to the glass, which is already half full, rather than lamenting over it being half empty. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. We got information from you about the unusual politics of South Korea. So we can proceed to the next speaker, that is Sri Bimal Shankar Nanda. His topic is women and environment movement in India. I am asking Professor Dr. Tilottama Mukherjee to introduce.
Thank you. Introduce Professor Bimal Shankar Nandu, our next speaker. He is a very popular face on the television and needs no introduction as such. Yet I must formally introduce him to our audience today. He is Associate Professor, Department of Political Science, Charu Chandra College in Kolkata. He is guest faculty at Department of Political Science, Diamond Harbour Women's University. Most importantly, he is the President of West Bengal Political Science Association. Over to you, sir. Sir, please unmute, sir. Please unmute. Sir, please unmute. Sir, Bimal sir, please unmute. Hello? Sir, can you hear me? Hello?
Hello, am I audible now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, okay. There are some problems. Thank you, Tilottama, and respected chairperson, my other fellow panelists, and the viewers and listeners. I think at the outset I must express my gratitude to the organizers for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. As we are running out of time, naturally I must be very brief in presenting my ideas. The topic will be women and environment movement in India. The much discussed topic. I don't know whether anything new can be discussed here, but to me the topic is interesting. For a couple of hours I am listening to the problem of patriarchy, the problem of male domination, etc. But there is one particular area where we cannot blame the patriarchy of male domination. It is environment-related movement where women participated spontaneously, and almost they took the movement. Some of the movements were taken to its logical conclusion. That is the very interesting area of Indian politics, where women participated in the movement voluntarily, and their role in these movements were and still are spectacular. Now, before discussing the role of women in the movements for environment protection in India, we need to focus on the intimate relationship between men and environment. As you all know, that the relationship between women and environment is an intimate one, and at least in India, from time immemorial, the women are within the environment. They live within the environment and they take environment as a part of their life. But however, it was from 60s of the previous century, the environment-related movements became popular, the ideas became popular, and it drew the attention of policymakers, scholars, and even the political leaders. And from 70s, when new social movements began to take place, the role of women and the relation between women and environment came to the forefront. Now, the relation between women and environment draws the attention of scholars, particularly when the idea of ecofeminism became popular. To the indigenous people, especially the indigenous women, the earth and its nature is intimately connected with their life and their culture. Now, in a country like India, where religion is an inseparable part of life, the earth is considered as a mother. We consider earth as a mother. And the earth is considered as God, a sacred thing. And it is also symbolized as the mother because it offers its inhabitants all the resources necessary for their existence and survival. That's why earth is considered as the mother. Here I want to give one example from my own experience. Though I live in Kolkata, I am from a rural district, that is the Midnapur district of West Bengal, where I was born and brought up and I have completed my college education. In the southern part of Bengal, that is in Midnapur district, and also in northern part of Odisha, there is one important festival. Those who know Bengali calendar, they know it, but those who do not know Bengali calendar, I just want to clarify it. The first month in Bengali calendar is the month of Boishakh. The second month is the month of Jyeshtha. This is the second month in Bengali calendar. And the last day of the month is called Sankranti in Bengal. Sankranti is the last day of the month. The last day of the month of Jyeshtha is called Rajas in the southern part of Midnapur and the vast area of northern Odisha. In Odisha, it is called Raja Parva. What is this? It is said that the last day of Jyeshtha is the day when Mother Earth is having her periods. She needs rest and no one should hurt Mother Earth. During the day, plowing is prohibited. During the day, no one is allowed to hit the earth with sharp weapon. Cutting the trees are prohibited in this day. And in northern Odisha, Raja Parva is a festival like Durga Puja in Bengal. The people visit their friends' places. And during this period, almost the worshipping of Mother Earth is done by the women. So this signifies the intimate relationship between women and nature. The festival ends with Ombubachi. Ombubachi is another important festival which is also observed in larger part of Bengal and Assam. Naturally, so many examples are there. I have no time to give all the examples. So, why we observe all these festivals? We think that Mother Earth provides us forests, rivers, and a diverse range of flora and fauna which are useful for medical or technological purposes. And for this reason, the indigenous people, particularly the women, feel a tremendous respect for their Mother Earth. They try to live harmoniously with the nature, and it is the part of their life. From the very beginning of their life, they are educated, and this education is no formal education. It is the part of their life, it is the part of their socialization process. They learn how to love the earth, how to love Mother Earth, and nature is an intrinsic part of their being. From the very beginning, they consider Mother Earth as their part of life. Now, women's direct contact with environment has produced them deep knowledge about environment. Thus, women's role in the movement for environment protection cannot be considered as artificial. It comes from their natural instinct to save Mother Earth. It's not a part of power politics. They do not participate in this environment to capture power. Rather, they participate in these movements just to save the environment which is the part of their life. It's natural, not artificial. It's natural because nature is a part of their life. Thus, women have always been the principal conservers of biodiversity. They are largely visible in the movements against deforestation and in conserving water and against construction of big dams, etc. Now, I want to give another point here. As we all know, women played important role in India's freedom struggle. But unfortunately, their role became limited in post-independence politics in our country. So many papers have been presented here, at least the previous session regarding it. I needn't go into detail, time is limited. But increasingly, time associated with politics and ideology took a backseat. The women were out of politics due to this reason. This situation was not favorable for women to take part in politics because they were reluctant to participate in the power game. They were reluctant to participate in the power game. Naturally, they began to avoid politics. Now, the women were in search of another areas where they can play their social role. Environment protection movement gave them adequate opportunity to play the social role. And another important point is that the idea of power politics was not associated with these movements, at least initially. But ultimately, some movements were associated with day-to-day politics or mainstream politics. But initially, power politics did not have any role in these environment movements. So women freely participated in these movements. They were not launched for any political gain. Naturally, the women freely participated in these movements. Now, I want to refer to certain discourses very briefly, which have taken shape from early 60s or 20th century, when women's participation drew the attention of everyone and environmentalism became a popular concept. The first discourse that emerged in relation to women was Women in Development Discourse, WID. It is the perspective that argued for women's status in developing countries. But the idea was very much discussed in Western countries, not in developing countries. Though the discourse is for the women of the developing countries of the world. The next shift in discourse took place in early 1970s. The people began to critique the roots of development. The model of development were discussed and the people began to question the need of this type of development. A new discourse was developed during this period and it was defined as Women Environment Development Discourse, WED discourse. The discourse is centralized around the synthesis of different ideologies, one of which was ecofeminism. Now, ecofeminism may be seen as a root ideology for WED, Women, Environment and Development, whereas women are viewed with a biological connection to nature that enables them to have a deeper connection and stewardship of it. And you all know that ecofeminism was originally coined by a French writer, and her name was Francoise de Eubon. In her book, La Feminisme en le Mot, written in French, in the year 1974 it was published. This theory asserts that the feminist perspective of ecology does not want to place women in the dominant position of the power. Rather, it calls for an egalitarian collaborative society in which there is no one dominant group. Rather, there are several branches of ecofeminism, liberal ecofeminism, socialist ecofeminism, etc. Associated with developing the idea of ecofeminism, you know the name Vandana Shiva, She is also a famous environmental activist and theorist. Now, however, constructing theory of developing discourse is the business of the scholars and academicians. The people who participate in grassroots level movement do not bother about narrative or discourse. It's the duty of the academicians to develop a discourse. Environment-related movements in India at the local level is going on for a long time. And the people who participate in this movement, particularly the women, they do not wait for any discourse. Rather, taking lesson from their life, they participate in the movement spontaneously. But in the last few decades, these movements have intensified and raised a wide range of questions. Now, Harsh Sethi, noted academician and scholar who focus on environment-related issues, he divides the environmental struggles in India into 5 categories. 1, forest-based movements. It is for forest policy, use of forest resources, etc. The second one is land use. It is associated with industrialization and loss of agriculture, degradation of land, exploitation of mineral resources, etc. The third movement is against big dams, like Narmada Bachao movement. They focus on the destruction of forests, involuntary displacement of people, etc. The fourth one is the movement against pollution, the pollution created by industries, and the fifth one is against exploitation of marine resources. I do not have much time to go into detail. I want to discuss the role of women in environment movements very briefly, citing some examples of movements launched in different parts of our country. Now, movements, one important characteristic of these movements is that movements in India are basically the struggle of the poor. It's the struggle of the poor. It's the struggle of the dispossessed persons, the marginalized sections of the society. They struggle for their subsistence. They struggle for their livelihood. And that's why the people, particularly the women, they participate in these movements spontaneously. Now, most movements are concerned with conserving natural resources to sustain livelihood. One of the first such ecological movement was in the Champaran district of Bihar in 1917. You know, the people in Champaran, they protested against indigo plantation, which was encouraged by the British and their local agents. Mahatma Gandhi took up the protest and ultimately plantation was abolished and women participated in this movement with large numbers. Another well-known Gandhian movement was Salt Satyagraha. Basically, it was a political movement, but definitely it was related with environment. It was fought for people's access to the common resources of salt pans, which was denied to them by the British rulers. Women began manufacturing and selling salt throughout India. They were the forerunners in the movement. In both these movements, women played participative and supportive role. I can give you one example. In Midnapur district, near Kontai area, there is one place, it is called Pichaboni. In local language, Pichaboni means, I will not go back. When salt movement was going on, and the British police started firing, the people said, no, we will not go back. They said, no, Pichaboni. That means we will not go back. The name of the place is Pichaboni. So many examples are there. In Gujarat, the movement was launched. The movement was launched in Bihar also, in different parts of the country. But ultimately, it was a movement ultimately related with nature. However, women in India are largely visible in the movements against deforestation and for the conservation of water. The movements which were launched after the freedom, after our freedom, are basically the movement against deforestation. One of the earliest movements which took place in India can be traced back to 1731. And it was among the Bishnois of Rajasthan who lived in the forests near Jodhpur. It was a scrap forest near Jodhpur. Amrita Bai of Kejaralli village sacrificed her life for saving Kejari trees of a village. They are sacred trees. These trees are sacred trees to the Bishnois. In order to save the trees, Amrita Devi hugged them. She embraced them and lost her life. So also 363 others from among the Bishnois. But as a result, the forest was spared due to the strong resistance of the villagers. Mind it, it was the 18th century, first part of 18th century. So we can say that Amrita Bai and her band of women Bishnois can be considered as the first women environmentalists in the world. This movement started by Amrita Bai in 1731 provided the inspiration for Bachni Devi and Gauri Devi of Diden, Uttar Pradesh in the Chipko movement, which was launched in 1972. Now, the emergence of modern environmental movement can be dated to 1972, the year when Chipko movement began. You know, the Terai region in the Himalayan foothills was a dense forest area. It caught the eyes of the timber merchants. As a result, there happened large-scale deforestation and denudation of the hills. What was the result? The result was the loss of topsoil, landslide, and flood. The present women living in these areas saw their lives getting harder. And you all know, in these hilly areas, the women almost perform all the duties, including harvesting. The movement started in Chamoli district and spread throughout the present-day Uttarakhand region by the end of the decade, the 70s. Rural women came together to save their forests by hugging the trees when the contractors came to fell them. And it was independent country, naturally no one to cut the women with the trees. So the forest was saved.
Within
Okay.
2 minutes, we are to.
Okay, I am trying to do it, madam. I am trying to do it. Now, one of the most important feature of Chipko movement was the voluntary mass participation of the rural women. The Chipko movement was not a movement just to save forests. Rather, it was a movement concerned with also the maintenance of traditional ecological balance in the fragile Tehri region. So, I want to give some other examples just within 1 or 2 lines. In 80s, another movement was launched in the Uttar Kannada region of Karnataka, Diden Mysore. It was called Apicko movement. It was just to save the forest. In 1950s, Uttar Kannada district forest covered more than 81% of geographical area. By 1980, the forest was shrunk to about 25% of the district. The Apicko movement was a response to this crisis. Then some important organizations was like Deccan Development Society, then the organization like SEWA, the SEWA organization which trained women in water harvesting, building capacity to manage and maintain water system, etc. And lastly, the Narmada Bachao movement, which was also led by women, which launched to protect the interest of the tribals, the downtrodden. So ultimately, to conclude, I just want to say one or two lines. It's the women was not guided by anyone to take part in environment movements. The question of patriarchy, the question of male domination is not involved in these movements. It's the women folk which participated in the movement spontaneously. They contributed heavily to the development of our society, an egalitarian society where the government was forced to think about the well-being of the common man. So women can play an important role in a movement which can change the nature of the society. Environment-related movements are examples. Here, I think that in these movements can give lessons to other movements how to serve the society through voluntary action. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. The final invited paper presentation today is by Sri Prashanjit Dasgupta. He is the Chief of Bureau at Uttar Bango Sangbad. He is also a poet. He is an honorary fellow of the Indian Ministry of Culture. He is a researcher in literature, film, religion, music, and philosophy. He has published 6 books and participated in many international conferences and seminars. He has set up a forum for ethnomusicology and he writes continuously. Besides being a renowned figure in Bengal's journalism today, he also plays several music instruments and is a prolific writer. Due to his extremely busy schedule, especially during these challenging COVID times as a journalist, he could not join us today, but he has sent his paper to us, which he was supposed to present in today's webinar. Please allow me to read it on his behalf. It will take 5 to 6 minutes. I'll read it quickly. It's in Bengali, so those who cannot understand Bangla, kindly excuse me. It's just 5 or 6 minutes that I'll take. তাহাদের কথা সংসদের তেজস্বিনীরা 1969 সাল দিল্লি সংসদে প্রধানমন্ত্রীর চেম্বারে বসে তৎকালীন প্রধানমন্ত্রী তাকে ঘিরে গোল করে দাঁড়িয়ে রয়েছেন গুজরাটের বিধায়করা অধিকাংশই মধ্যবয়স্ক বৃদ্ধ পুরুষ পরনে সাদা কুর্তা পাজামা ধুতি মাথায় নেহেরু টুপি মিসেস গান্ধী তখন টেবিলে বসে একমনে দেখে যাচ্ছেন সরকারি নথিপত্র কোনো দিকে খেয়াল নেই তার অপেক্ষারত সেই মানুষগুলি অধীর আগ্রহে অনুগ্রহে তাকিয়ে আছেন তার দিকে কি রয়েছেন অবাক চোখে ভারতীয় রাতির প্রবাদ প্রতিম সেই নারী চরিত্রটির দিকে 15 বছর পর 1984 সালের 31 অক্টোবর দেহরক্ষীর গুলিতে ঝাঁঝরা হয়ে যাবে যার দেহ ভারতীয় রাজনীতিতে নারী শক্তির উত্থানের কথা বলতে প্রথমেই যে মনে পড়ে তা ফটোগ্রাফার রঘু রায়ের তোলা এই ছবিটি অসাধারণ সেই ছবি নিঃশব্দে বুঝিয়ে দেয় ভারতীয় রাজনীতিতে দ্য গ্রেট মাদার আর্কিটাইপের সংজ্ঞা শুধু রাজনীতি নয় ভারতের স্বাধীনতা সংগ্রামের ইতিহাসেও এই মহিয়সীদের পরিচয় পাওয়া যায় লোকভঙ্গ বা অসহযোগ আন্দোলন বা স্বাধীনতার সংগ্রামে উঠে আসা মাতঙ্গিনী হাজরা বীণা দাস কল্পনা দত্ত বা প্রীতিলতা ওয়াদেদারের মতো তেজস্বিনী সেই মহিলাদের পরিচয় পাই আমরা ভারত তাদের অবদানের কথা কখনোই ভোলেনি স্বাধীনোত্তর আধুনিক ভারতের রূপরেখা নির্মাণে এদের অবদান বিশেষ করে এই দেশের মানদণ্ড নির্মাণে পরাধীন ভারতের অগ্নিযুগে যেমন এরা রিভলভার বা রাইফেল হাতে মসনদ সামলেছেন তেমনি ভাবে স্বাধীনতা পরবর্তীকালে আধুনিক ভারতের চরিত্র নির্মাণে এনারা উত্তীর্ণ হয়েছেন অস্ত্র হিসেবে ব্যবহার করেছেন রাজনীতি স্বদেশ চর্চা কূটনীতি সমাজবাদ ও সংবিধানকে 47 স্বাধীনতার প্রায় 5 বছর পর 1951-52 সালে তৎকালীন দেশের প্রথম মুখ্য নির্বাচন কমিশনার সুকুমার সেনের উদ্যোগে আয়োজিত সর্বপ্রথম লোকসভা নির্বাচন সংসদ ভবনের দরজা খুলে দেয় মহিলাদের কাছে। 489টি আসনের মধ্যে 364 আসন জিতে জওহরলাল নেহরু সরকার গঠন হয় শাহী দিল্লির মসনদে। প্রধান বিরোধী পেয়ে উঠে আসে সিপিআই। এ কে গোপালন হয়েছিলেন বিরোধী দলনেতা। সংসদ প্রায় প্রথম স্পিকার জি.ভি. মাভলঙ্কর, ডেপুটি স্পিকারের পদে এম.এ. আয়েঙ্গার, সর্দার হুকুম সিং ও সেক্রেটারি জেনারেল এম.এন. কৌলকে। প্রথম লোকসভায় 489টি আসনের মধ্যে 24টি আসনে জিতে আসেন মহিলা প্রার্থীরা। 24 জন অসামান্য নারী যাদের ভুলেছে সময়। কেই বা মনে রেখেছে অ্যানি মাস্কারানে সহ রাজকুমারী অমৃত কৌরকে, শকুন্তলা নায়ার, সুভদ্রা যোশী, গঙ্গা দেবী, সুচেতা কৃপলানি, উমা নেহেরু, বিজয়লক্ষ্মী পণ্ডিত, তারকেশ্বরী সিনহা, আম্মু স্বামীনাথন, সুষমা সেনের মতো বিদুষীদের। বাংলা থেকে সেই প্রথমবার লোকসভায় যান রেণু চক্রবর্তী সিপির ও ইলা পাল চৌধুরীর কংগ্রেস মতো ডাকসাহিত্যের নেত্রীরা। পার্লামেন্টের মোড় ঘুরিয়ে দেওয়ার ক্ষমতা রাখেন এরা। জওহরলালের ঐতিহ্য বই নিয়ে দেশ তার তৃতীয় প্রধানমন্ত্রী রূপে পেয়েছিল এক বিদুষী মহিলাকে। নেহেরু কন্যা ইন্দিরা গান্ধী 1966 সালে হাতে তুলে নেন শাসনভার। দেশ পেল প্রথম মহিলা প্রধানমন্ত্রী। কিন্তু পুরুষতান্ত্রিক সংসদে এতটা সহজ হয়নি তার পথ চলা। কম কথা বলা পছন্দ করতেন ইন্দিরা, যার জন্য সংসদের সমস্ত বিরোধীরা তাকে গুন্ডি গুড়িয়া বা বোবা পুতুল বলে ব্যঙ্গও করেছেন। তবে হেরে যাননি ইন্দিরা, একটু একটু করে প্রমাণ করেছেন নিজেকে। ঘুরিয়ে দিয়েছিলেন সরকারের মোড়, সৃষ্টি করেছিলেন নয়া ইতিহাস। অথচ তার মধ্যে নারীবাদের এক ধারা দেখতে পেয়েছিলেন দেশ। 1952 সালে মার্কিন বান্ধবী ডোরেথি নরম্যানকে লেখা এক চিঠিতে ইন্দিরা গান্ধী লিখেছিলেন, I am in no sense a feminist, but I believe in women being able to do everything. Given the opportunity to develop, capable Indian women have come to the top at once. খুব সহজেই বোঝা যায় নারী স্বাধীনতা সংগ্রাম ও অধিকারের দাবি নিয়ে এক ভিন্ন ঘরানার মত পোষণ করতেন ইন্দিরা। আজও তা সমানরূপে প্রাসঙ্গিক, সমসাময়িক ও স্মরণীয়। ইন্দিরার রাজপাট শেষ হয় 84 সালে। তারপর থেকে এখন পর্যন্ত কেটে গেছে প্রায় 4 দশক। এই 40 বছরের ইতিহাসে ভারতের সংসদে বয়ে গেছে বহু ঝড়। পার্লামেন্ট সাক্ষী থেকেছে বহু রাজনৈতিক পালাবদল তথা উত্থান ও পতনের। সরকার এসেছে গেছে, নতুন মুখ, বর্ণাঢ্য চরিত্র উঠে এসেছে সংসদ চত্বরে ও একই সাথে স্বমহিমায় আবির্ভূত হয়েছেন বেশ কিছু অসামান্য ক্ষমতা সম্পন্ন জননেত্রীরা। 80 দশকে উত্থান ঘটে আঞ্চলিক রাজনীতি ও রাজনৈতিক দলের। একই সাথে পার্লামেন্ট পায় কিছু অসম্ভব প্রতিভাবান নেত্রী ও সংসদদের। দক্ষিণে আন্না ডিএমকে জয়ললিতা, সংসদে পা রাখেন যাদবপুর থেকে সদ্য জিতে আসা তরুণ তুর্কি মমতা বন্দ্যোপাধ্যায়, কাশ্মীর থেকে পিডিপি চিফ মেহবুবা মুফতি, উত্তরপ্রদেশ থেকে মায়াবতী ও সর্বোপরি কংগ্রেসের বিদেশি বউ সোনিয়া গান্ধী। রাজনৈতিক বোধ বুদ্ধির সাথে পাল্লা দিয়ে ধরে বেয়ে উঠেছে সংসদীয় ক্ষমতা দখল ও প্রদর্শনের লড়াই। তারই কিছু অংশ বিক্ষিপ্ত তুলে ধরবার চেষ্টা করা হলো। 2012 সাল থেকে সংসদ কভার করছি আমি। অতীতের দিন থেকে বর্তমান সময় পর্যন্ত সংসদ সাক্ষী থেকেছে তার মহিলা সাংসদদের দাপুটে ইনিংসের কাছে। আজও তাদের কথা মনে করা হলে বা আলোচনায় অংশ নিয়ে চোখ বন্ধ করে দেখতে পাই স্পিকারের আসনে বসে আছেন মীরা কুমার, দেশের প্রথম মহিলা স্পিকার তিনি। লোকসভার ওয়েলে তখন দক্ষযজ্ঞ চলছে নতুন রাজ্য তেলেঙ্গানা নিয়ে। হঠাৎই পিপলস স্প্রে ছুড়ে দিলেন দক্ষিণের। Can you please mute your microphone? Those who are not speaking, it's echoing. Please. হঠাৎই পিপলস স্প্রে ছুড়ে দিলেন দক্ষিণের সীমান্ত কংগ্রেসের সাংসদ রাজাগোপাল। গোলমরিচের ঝাঁঝালো গন্ধে লোকসভার ছত্রাখান। দমবন্ধকর গন্ধে অসুস্থ হয়ে পড়েছেন অনেকে। আবু জগজীবন রামের মেয়ে মীরা কিন্তু বেরিয়ে যাননি। মাস্টাররা অনুরোধ করা সত্ত্বেও বেশ কিছুক্ষণ হাউসে ছিলেন তিনি। নাকে মুখে শাড়ির আঁচল চাপা দিয়ে গলা উঁচু করে বলেছিলেন, ডোন্ট ডু দিস, দিস ইজ আনপার্লামেন্টারি। পরবর্তীকালে তার সেই ঐতিহ্য বহন করেছেন বিজেপির স্পিকার সুমিত্রা মহাজন। লোকসভায় প্রতিদিন দেখা যায় রমা দেবীকে। সকাল সকাল পার্লামেন্টে চলে আসেন তিনি। বিহারের শিহর থেকে বিজেপির টিকিটে 3 বার লোকসভায় জিতে আসেন তিনি। হেমা মালিনী বিখ্যাত অভিনেত্রী সাংসদ তারই পাশে এসে বসেন। শ্যামবর্ণা দেহাতি মাথায় চওড়া করে ঘুমটা দেয়া রমা দেবী একটু জড়সড় হয়ে থাকেন। অথচ তাকে দেখলে কি বলবে অল্প বয়সে বিয়ে হয়ে আসা মহিলাটি চোখের সামনে তার স্বামীকে উচ্চ বর্ণের মানুষদের হাতে গুলিতে ঝাঁঝরা হতে দেখেছিলেন জমি ঘটিত বচসা ঘিরে। চোখের জল মুছে আইন নিয়ে পড়াশোনা করে ওকালতি শুরু করে দীর্ঘ আইনি লড়াই লড়ে তার স্বামীর খুনিদের জেলে পাঠিয়েছিলেন তিনি। তার জীবন নিয়ে সিনেমাও হয়েছে একসময় ভোজপুরি ভাষায়। সংসদ সফরে এসেছেন দক্ষিণের কিংবদন্তি নেত্রী অভিনেত্রী মুখ্যমন্ত্রী জয়ললিতা। তার সাংসদেরা তাকে পুরুচ্চি থেলাইভাম্মা মানে মহান দলনেত্রী বলে সম্বোধন করেন। আন্না ডিএমকে সাংসদদের পকেটে আজও থাকে তার ছবি। সংসদে যেদিন পা রাখলেন সেদিন গোটা পার্লামেন্টে উৎসবের বাতাবরণ। অথচ তার হুঁশ নেই। গোটা পার্লামেন্ট চষে বেরিয়েছেন তিনি, দেখা করেছেন হাসি মুখে সকলের সাথে। হঠাৎই চেন্নাইবাসী সংসদের এক তামিল ওয়েটারকে কাছে ডেকে তার মেয়ের পড়াশোনার জন্য তুলে দিয়েছিলেন টাকা। প্রত্যেক অধিবেশনের শুরুতে একবার করে সংসদে আসতেন মুখ্যমন্ত্রী মমতা বন্দ্যোপাধ্যায়, দেখা করতেন মন্ত্রী শান্তি সবার সাথে। সংসদে
for the bill to be approved by the Rajya Sabha, and on that day the bill was approved. We were very happy because as I have told you that we were doing UNDF project in order to motivate the women political leaders to come forward and participate in the democracy, so that the bill 2/3 majority bill is passed in the legislature or the parliament, I can say. But the thing is that it was passed in the Rajya Sabha. But one of the very eminent, I would say two very eminent political leaders, one is Lalu Prasad Yadav, another one is is Sharad Pawar. Both of them declared that we will commit suicide if the women bill is approved. So that bill died in Rajya Sabha, and yet there is no sense of it is being raised up and approved again. So it cannot be done. It is the men themselves who are in the forefront. They don't want to lose their seat. And a very good example of this, as we have seen, that in Bihar, when Lalu Prasad Yadav was elected as the railway minister, he gave his position to his wife because he doesn't want to lose his seat. So they are ready to give the position to a person whom they think that they would be under his control. And so so long this type of domination and attitude of narrowness is still there, no space can be made for the women. So it is the women themselves who have to fight back and come to the forefront. So thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there... Hello? Thank you, ma'am. Is there any other question directed to anybody else? Sonu, ma'am, did you get any question?
Yeah, there were two questions.
Okay, ma'am.
One was why are more women needed in the parliament? Well, this is very why more women are needed in parliament. See, when we are talking about changing the patriarchal setup, and when we are talking about women's empowerment, according to my understanding, there are two levels at which we have to focus. One is at the societal level, where we need to bring about attitudinal and behavioral change. But at the same time, we also need to have laws and policies to this effect, and therefore we need more and more women representation in parliament, so that women-friendly laws are passed easily. So that is the simple point why we need more and more women in the parliament. And as we all know, that women represents the 50% of the almost 50% of the population. So according to the population, there should be some, you can say, proportional representation in the parliament. And to the second question, how many of us are actually desirous to empower our better half? So I think we don't have any answer to it. Maybe our male colleagues and participants who have joined here, maybe they are in a better position to answer this. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Biman sir, did you get any question? Sir? Sir, did you get any question?
No.
Okay. Okay. Thank you then. Thank you, speakers. It was really enriching, very informative. Thank you very much. Here we end this session, and I now call upon Sri Chandan Roy to take charge of the next session. Thank you. Thank you, speakers.
Thank you. Thank you, Chandran. Thank you, Chandran, for your nice introduction. I'd like to extend my thanks to the organizing colleges for giving me an opportunity to chair this session. We have in this session four invited speakers, and how far my knowledge goes, all the four invited speakers are present here. Four young scholars are from diverse backgrounds and diverse subjects. So we do hope that that will be a very interesting and attractive session since they are waiting for us. Being on the chair, I'd like to humbly request and remind all the invited speakers to please confine your presentation within 10 to 12 minutes because we are also already running behind the schedule. After the presentation of all the papers, all the four papers, there will be an interactive session. So with this, I'd like to request Professor Nicholas Das Mukherjee to present your paper. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Professor. Here I want to present a PPT. Is it possible to make a presentation with PPT? Yeah, I did it then. Okay, I did it.
Okay.
Now it is your presentation now.
But I'm not getting how to share my PPT with. Okay. It is. Is it visible? Again, I have to share. Okay.
You need to go to present now button. Again, the earlier attempt you have taken, the same way you have to present the entire screen. And yes, your screen is now we are seeing your screen.
I'm not getting. Something is wrong actually. I just see. Just try. Screen? Okay. Okay, now is it, yeah, is it visible now?
Yes, it is visible now.
Okay. Sorry for the inconvenience. Okay, I'm Dr. Mithilesh Mukherjee from Varanasi. And first, before I start, I want to thank Dr. Tilotma for giving me this opportunity. And it's truly a pleasure to be a part of this webinar. Today's topic of my presentation is political leadership for Indian women, as good or as bad as others. The purpose of this paper is to explore the women leadership pattern in India and their place in Indian politics. I would like to start my presentation with this quote of Eleanor Roosevelt. She said once that politics is a man's world, not my words, but by men themselves. If women want to be index, they need to grow skin as thick as a rhinoceros. And the same kind of views has been expressed by Ann Ticknor, feminist IR theorist. She says that we are socialized to believe that war and power politics are more effectively managed by men, while women are ascribed roles in reproduction and homemaking. So, as we all agree to the point of view that politics has been considered as men's domain where women has hardly any role to play, but things has changed with the suffragette movement, which started in late 19th and 20th century. People started taking women a bit seriously, and they started recognizing their potential and their role in politics. So what are the features of Indian politics as we see from the gender perspective? Indian politics, as we see in other parts of the world, has always represented a patriarchal mindset, and it has always been dominated by men, where women are just there to provide marital support for politics of men. And we see a persistent gender gap in political office holdings and unequal gender representation in political activities and discussions. So where do we stand? India ranks 149 in list of 193 countries in terms of women's representation in lower house of the parliament as of July 1st, 2017, and India ranks 20th from the bottom in terms of representation of women in parliament. And if we talk of Asian countries, India stands 30th position out of 18 countries, while countries like South Sudan, Saudi Arabia have fared well in bringing women to parliament than India. Though we have made few progress in terms of numbers, female members has gradually climbed from 4.7% in 1952 to 11.4 in 2014, and which bettered to 14% in 2019. However, this number is not satisfactory. If we see the state assemblies, the percentage is being constantly being lower. And to improve this participation of women in Indian politics, there have been some legal provisions made by earlier governments, like constitutional amendment of 73rd and 74th, by which Panchayati Raj institutions were recognized and women were given 33% reservation at Panchayat level. And further, it was increased to 50% reservation for women and PRI in 2009. And because of that, we have few states in India like Andhra Pradesh, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, Himachal Pradesh, and others who have implemented 50% reservation for women. And we have few panchayats where 100% elected panchayat heads are women. To increase this percentage of women in politics, again, one bill introduced in Parliament, 108th Constitutional Amendment Bill, to give 33.3% reservation in Lok Sabha and State Legislative Assembly for women, but it could not pass. Though it was passed in Rajya Sabha, but it could not pass in Lok Sabha because of less of political consensus. So, what is the Indian scenario if we talk about political leadership of women in India? So, it is very interesting fact here that feminism in India was initiated, supported, and promoted by men, unlike Western countries where women had it very hard way. Political leaders like Mahatma Gandhi and others, they not only realized and recognized their potential, but they gave a due respect and place to women in the freedom struggle. And it was Gandhi who endorsed Sarojini Naidu's candidature for president of Indian National Congress in 1925. And he said on her appointment that it is the fittest opportunity for paying compliment that is long overdue. So we see that our previous political leaders were more progressive and liberal in their approach comparatively to today's leaders. And along with there were several prominent female figures who greatly contributed in national movement like Sarla Devi, Muthulakshmi Reddy, the names are more. But despite having played this kind of role in independence movement, women did not get any quota or reserve seats in any representative body. There were few women who actually demanded for this reservation, but there were few women who opposed reservation in any representative body like Sarojini Naidu. She was not in favor of any kind of reservation for women. So, nevertheless, through the integrity of India, great women leaders have made their place by their grit and determination to bring a change the country wished to see. Many of them induced a significant development and change that country needed. And the first Lok Sabha, when it was constituted, we had 5% of members who were female. The number was less, but we were ahead of Western countries like the US and United Kingdom. At that point of time, United States of America had only 2% of women in their representative bodies, and United Kingdom had 3%. So we were ahead at that time, but we couldn't sustain or maintain this percentage. In Western countries, they made a better, they did a better job than Indian. So they have now better percentage of women candidates in representative bodies than Indian representative bodies. So we went backward instead of going forward in this direction. Gandhiji was ahead of Roosevelt and Churchill when it came to inducting women in politics. However, the US and the UK have since made far more rapid strides in this regard. So if we look at India's political history from gender perspective, we see
a contradictory picture of women in politics. On the one hand, our country has had numerous distinguished female leaders, for example, Mrs. Gandhi, Jayalalitha, Sushma Swaraj, and many more. And the other hand, Indian politics has been an area occupied by masculinity and machismo, and the percentage of female legislators has increased at a very painstakingly slow rate. So there are some accusations which are made very commonly for this less number of women in politics. So what are those accusations? And for these, most of the time women are made responsible. The first accusation we find it, the women are less interested in politics because of its criminal and violent nature. So what is the reality? If we see the number says the difference voters turnout and party membership in India. If we see, it is we have many women in Indian politics. The data from CSDS shows that number of women in election campaigns increased substantially from 13% in 1999 general elections to 22% in Lok Sabha elections of 2009. And they have been actively participating in all political campaigns. BJP, as of 2018, had 3 crore women members in their party, and all other Democratic Women's Association claims to have 1 crore women members in their party. And if you see the voters turnout of women, that has increased by 27% since 1962. In comparison to men's voters, turnout rate has only increased by 7%. So the gap, which was 16.7% in 1962, has narrowed to 0.3% in 2019. So that is how we can see these numbers tell a different story. Women are as interested as men in politics. This is the graph. You can see how this gap in voters turnout is being narrowed from 1991 to 2019. And this is from 1962 to 2019. And this is another data which shows that we have constantly moving in a better direction when it comes to representing in parliament. The another accusation about women in Indian politics is that the women in Indian politics are mere proxies or dummy candidates of their husbands or father. They are not independent women who want to be in politics. So what is the reality? We don't deny the fact that dynasties have had helped women in making it to representative bodies. But over the last 3 Lok Sabha elections, BJP had 53 women MPs, of whom only 39.6 are dynastic. Where the Congress has different story, it has 74.3% dynast of the same period. But this is not that all the women are coming from dynasties. If we see or we go at state level or panchayat level, those women are not coming from dynasties. And another accusation I would like to deny on this basis that coming from dynasties doesn't make them proxy or dummy politicians. We can't say Indira Gandhi, Sonia Gandhi, Sheila Dikshit, Vasundhara Raje are just like dummy politicians. Calling them dummy politicians just because they are coming from dynasties, I would say it would be prejudiced gender bias against them, because when it is a male member, they are accused of nepotism and are never seen as dummy politicians. So another accusation which is made about women is that they are non-winnable, and this is the reason they don't get tickets to contest the election. If we see the reality, the percentage of women candidates in the election is, and the winning rate of women candidates in every election is higher than they are fielded in elections. And this is the graph which shows that in 1952 we fielded around 2.7% women, where the percentage of women, they were 4.7%, and in 2014 it was 7.4%, and the winning rate was winning percentage was 11.4%. So again, I will refute this accusation of about women in Indian politics. So what are the reason behind fewer number of women leaders in India? So what I see, the first reason what I see is the economic dependency of women on their family members or the male members. Most of the women in Indian society still are economically dependent on their male members, and it is difficult for them to get economic support from the family. It is easier for a male member to get the same kind of financial support, but when it comes to women, they don't get. Another reason is domestic and family responsibility and lack of family support. Whatever we are, as a women, we still keep our priorities like family as the first priority and our career the second priority. And when it comes to politics, demands your 24-hour involvement and active role. So when it comes to, so it is difficult for women to strike a balance in both the responsibility, family as well as politics. So this is another reason what I feel is a hurdle in women's way to politics. Another is character assassination. In India, this is like women chastity is very fragile, and this is a one way of controlling women's sexuality. So going out, spending time with men, we don't consider it decent. So this is another reason of women not going into politics. Another is lack of acceptability of women candidates and confidence in women contenders. Women are seen as not rational, indecisive, and impetuous, and that is why they are denounced of leadership abilities. And what saddens me is that the internalization of sexism in women themselves. What we see as prejudice against women, we all live, we believe, and somehow we all, in some amount, we all carry all those prejudice. So this is the saddened part of this sexism. So I would like to conclude my presentation with this note that in spite of disadvantages that women have faced in politics, their performance has been largely independent of the prevailing political environment, which catapulted them to power, and more dependent on their innate abilities, learning skills, mental toughness, and survival instincts. Indira Gandhi was famously dubbed as a mute doll and expected to fail before syndicate. In reality, she turned the tables on the syndicate and muted the opposition. Similarly, the late Ms. Jayalalitha was able to carve out her political space in an extremely hostile environment. There have been many similar examples of women who were thrust into politics, whether by choice, circumstances, or as proxy, but were able to carve out their independent political identities. The initial beginnings may be tougher for women in India, especially in patriarchal communities, but there has been an increasing acceptance of women in power and tendency to interact with them as with other politicians. These women have made their own paths towards success and have shown the world that anything can be done with complete will and determination, though others just behave the power of politics. But whatever it may be, there had been women in the political upheaval of the country. There would be a ray of hope for many of those women who are still in the cycles of stereotypes to become unshackled from them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Joyce Mukherjee, for your nice education, but within the time limit, you have nicely presented the Indian scenario from the political mindset. Sorry, from it is the parent mindset. You started your education with the politics is named words, the famous statement of Roosevelt, and then you enter into the political representation picture in India, where you show that the Indian situation is not so rosy if we compare with the African and also some of the Asian countries. We also refuted the misplaced allegations against women's candidates for entering into politics, and that's from the lack of non-benevolent, lack of benevolent character or dummy candidates or the domestic compulsion, and it is also the middle class prejudice that women are burned or prevented to enter into politics. You have already hinted to your logic and to your information and data. So thank you for your fantastic presentation with data and information and with also very logical argument. With this now, may I, Chandan, may I request the second speaker? Sorry, you introduce the second speaker. Professor Chakraborty, it is now your turn. But again, I humbly request you to maintain the time limit because we are now running beyond the schedule. So with this, I would like to ask you to make your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. And I thank the organizers for inviting me, and I thank the audience for their patient hearing along with my co-panelists. The title of my presentation is Silencing of Suffering Voices, Experiences of Women Holocaust Survivors. As we are all aware that we are commemorating the 75th anniversary of the end of the Second World War, as well as the end of the tragedy of the Holocaust. And we know that the history of the Second World War is replete with comparable instances of sexual violence perpetrated on non-combatant women and its attempted silencing. And a significant chapter of the Holocaust history is consumed by the experiences of the women who were cooped up in the Nazi ghettos and concentration camps and were derogatorily branded as ghetto prostitutes, inflicting stigma on the female body, psyche, and spirit, and tarnishing their image as collaborators or sex survivors. It is here with this background that I would like to present an understanding of the paradigm of violence on the non-combatant Jewish and non-Jewish women in the ghettos and its explanation from the critical feminist perspective. It also attempts to address the inadequacy of scientific sociological inquiry, which necessitated the revival of this issue by the feminist critiques and its contribution to the study of Holocaust, gender, international law, and social justice. Now, the post-Second World War investigations were not aware or oblivious to the sexual crimes committed against the ghetto women, though the archival records of the post-Second World War trials of women perceived to be collaborators or sex survivors or branding them as ghetto prostitutes were publicized. The branding was a sweeping generalization without delving into the causes and conditions which had forced women to bargain sex for survival. And as we all know that all women victims could not even be generally regarded as ghetto prostitutes, and such an interpretation of women in the ghettos and their sweeping generalization actually masks the reality of the conduct of rape and sexual atrocities on women. It was thus only a male construct and also a portrayal of women as peripheral, helpless, fragile, morally deficient, or as deficient in their victimization. So as against such a portrayal, the question that comes to the mind is what are the reasons behind the silencing of the victims who survived or bore witness to the saga of sexual atrocities that were inflicted by the Nazi oppressors. It is apprehended in later research and scholarship that the victims were motivated either by the sense of degradation or taboo to speak up or recount their experiences, or they were faced with the dilemma of attempting to relate their experiences in a context that established rape and sexual violence were disassociated and non-existent in the history of the Holocaust, thereby remaining imprisoned by memories they could not share. The silence could have further been reinforced by the attitude of the later researchers as well as the gender of the researchers who were probably uncomfortable with or unwilling to discuss the subject of sexual violence and atrocity. Whatever may have been the cause, this evasiveness resulted in discrediting the experiences of the women in the ghettos and also bolstered the general conviction in the Nazi official policy of prohibition of rape of Jewish women, which would tantamount to commingling and racial defilement. Resultantly, the issue of rape and sexual violence on the women in the ghettos, Jewish and non-Jewish alike, was often relegated to the victims of sex slaves of a host of perpetrators, including members of the SS, the German soldiers, the concentration camp guards, non-German allies and collaborators, civilians, and even fellow prisoners, and this was never documented or masked under the facade of prostitution, consensual sex, or manipulation of sex for survival. Nevertheless, it was a reality, was employed as an instrument of war, and it was an organized crime meted out to Jewish and non-Jewish women and girls alike. At least until the 1970s, the double jeopardy or double vulnerability of Jewish women in the ghettos, which stemmed from their ascription of race and gender or sexuality, was missing from the canon of Holocaust literature, primarily for the reasons I just discussed above. Most importantly, in 1983, there was an international conference convened about women surviving the Holocaust in New York, and it was convened by Esther Katz and Joan Ringelheim, critical feminists and Holocaust scholars in New York in 1983, which for the first time attracted 400 participants, including survivors, scholars, and members of the general public, and played a seminal role in highlighting the need for incorporating female narratives in the history and discourse of the Holocaust. So having situated the issue of the exclusion of the experiences of women from the principal literature of Holocaust studies, the contribution of critical feminist theory in reviving this structure, in reviving it into the ambit of academic discipline, cannot be ignored. Feminist theories have established gender as their central focus of research, we are all aware. Their experiences and particularity in sociological analysis has been emphasized, and most importantly, these theories have attempted to enhance the consciousness whereby women's voices are heard as they are encouraged to share their personal stories and experiences. So, what has been the contribution of feminism in this respect? Critical feminism in particular has erected a framework of analysis, thus facilitating the inclusion of voices, and it has tried to counter.
But we have to admit that this is one of the areas of state affairs which is very difficult. It has been very difficult for women to enter. Although women diplomats have made their mark in Indian foreign services, since morning we are saying that, but when it comes to foreign policy makers or women political leaders giving direction to foreign policy, the number is ridiculously low. Now, the only two women who actually got visibility because of the positions that they held and the direct impact that they had on Indian foreign policy are Indira Gandhi and Sushma Swaraj. Indira Gandhi being the first prime minister, women prime minister of the country for a substantial period of time, and Sushma Swaraj being the first full-time Ministry of External Affairs. Now, two women from two different, in fact, rival parties, two different sets of political realities. They have faced two different timelines, absolutely contradictory ideologies or different ideologies, but they have on their account made an impact on foreign policy making. I'm trying to find out, as foreign policy makers, they have proved effective, capable as women. Now, Indira Gandhi, we had such an enlightening lecture by Dr. Tridip Chakrabarti right at the outset. We have been enlightened. We know how much work she has done. Any consideration in feminist voice when it comes to foreign policy will be incomplete if I don't mention Indira Gandhi. She had an experience, she had a familiarity with foreign affairs right from the outset because of being the daughter of Nehru. But yes, she had her own persona, her own impact on foreign policy. Her opponents at the outset, again, they belittled her as Gudiya, but later on, she gained the reputation of being one of the stern, skillful, and ruthless in the positive sense of the term in dealing with political opponents or consolidating power. Indian foreign policy, particularly in the first decade in her stewardship, we have seen in Sir's lecture that it went through so many problems, and these problems were dangerous enough to deliver a fatal blow on the very existence as as a nation state, but she dealt with these problems in a skill that leaders world over envied, I should say. So be it dealing with the Pakistan war or the Bangladesh crisis or the refugee influx or the shaky relationship that we have had with the US, or signing the Treaty of Friendship with USSR, maintaining the NAM stand when the Cold War was at its peak, trying to reconcile the relation with China, conducting the first peaceful nuclear test in Pokhran. Well, Indira Gandhi's foreign policy illustrates hardcore realism. It's a combination of firmness, flexibility, and realism, in fact. Well, there is no evidence to prove that she had any direct reservations with the foreign policy that was the framework that was set up by Nehru. But we have to agree that the policy became much more pragmatic in her. Of course, the times had changed, but it became much more pragmatic in her era. So even her hardest critics would agree that she was one of the strongest political leaders that India ever got. When Sushma Swaraj, when she became the External Affairs Minister, many saw it as a move to keep a rival away from domestic affairs. So foreign affairs has always been a call of Prime Minister. So it was seen this way, that her role, Sushma Swaraj's role, would be insignificant given the fact that Prime Minister Modi was engaging into much of the bulk of the frontline diplomacy. But Sushma Swaraj, if we see in her period as an External Affairs Minister, she did not in fact compete for the limelight. She complemented it in a rather effective way. So her very efficient use of social media, particularly Twitter, to set up a stage for otherwise cold or distant Ministry of External Affairs to become a little more approachable. All her activities, right from helping Indians in distress worldwide, or the Doklam standoff, providing medical visas to Pakistanis with serious medical problems on humanitarian grounds, to dealing with Indo-Pakistan tensions post-Pulwama, to upgradation of the 20-year-old Look-East policy to Act-East policy that happened during her era, taking the case of Kulbhushan Jadhav to International Court of Justice, to being the first Indian to attend Organization of Islamic Nations meeting at the face of Pakistan. She tried to basically she presented herself in a highly dignified manner and worked towards developing diplomatic relations. Again, I mean, she was the External Affairs Minister, not Prime Minister, but yes, definitely she made much of the contribution. To conclude, I want to say that there is very little to suggest that these two women in their own level have proved anywhere less as compared to men or differed from men in dealing with situations of conflict or problems threatening the national interest or while conducting foreign affairs in general. Of course, they have made mistakes like their male counterparts, but all those virtues that were tagged as masculine at the outset, courage, assertiveness, strength, pragmatism, rationality, they have displayed all that in their own practices. They have proved themselves capable in conducting foreign affairs. Well, it is rather disturbing to end on the note that despite proving to be capable for leaders or foreign policy makers, the number of women in foreign policy remains ridiculously low. Well, this could be because overall number of women in foreign policy being low, but especially in international relations and foreign policy. So I would like to end on that note. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Professor Tirupkar, for your excellent presentation. Foreign policy and the role of women in general, we can say. Foreign policy is male-dominant. It's a male's world. It is not being represented by female or woman is your central thing. But at the same time, you have also presented two very glaring examples of two prominent Indian female ministers, especially Indira Gandhi and Sushma Swaraj, for their very positive role in formulating foreign policy and also guiding and directing the foreign policy in a very positive and very cooperative note. You also mentioned that there are hardly few officials in foreign department or in South Bloc due to some preventive conditions or some of the conditions which are not fitted with the qualification of female candidates. But you also presented it very fantastically with a positive note that female policymakers and female leaders can also play a very constructive role in formulating very different kind of foreign policy. So with this, I thank you again for your fantastic and attractive presentation. I would like to ask the audience and the participants here. Please put your questions. One more presentation I done. I know one more presentation. Just a small reminder to the audience and the participants. So please jot down your question if you do have any questions in the chat box, or at the end of our session you may ask directly. So with this, I would like to Chandan Rai to invite another or the last invited speaker. Welcome, Dr. Utpal Rai. When I saw your title of your presentation, I got very interested to listen from you. It's very title shows that we have some positive influence and positive arguments of women representation of women participation from ancient India. So I would like again to request you to confine your presentation within the limited time.
Thank you.
Best of luck. Best of luck for your presentation.
Sir, am I audible?
Yes.
Good afternoon. Respected Chairperson Dr. Subhash Singh Roy, Associate Professor, Head of the Department Political Science, Chandidas Mahavidyalaya, Birbhum, and Mr. Chandan Roy, Department of Political Science, and my dear fellow colleagues and participants. My special thanks and heartiest gratitude to the convener of the today's webinar, Dr. Tilottama Mukherjee, Head of the Department of Political Science, Syama Prasad College, and Joint Convener Mr. Chandan Roy, Department of Political Science, Malda College, and my ex-colleagues, giving me a wonderful opportunity as an invited speaker on today's national level webinar on women in politics. Myself, Dr. Utpal Roy, Assistant Professor, Department of History, Shahid Khudram College, and I'm going to present here my paper on women participation and deliberative role in the early Indian political organization, a special study on Vidhata. Yes, political participation is a significant way to women's empowerment. No doubt the balanced participation of men and women in the actual decision-making process can reduce the gender gap. If we carefully study our historical background or political history, yes, we have some good example of women political participation like Rajia Sultana, Noor Jahan, Lakshmi Bai, Ani Besant, Sarojini Naidu, and so on. In the post-independent period, few dominant women political leaders led India. Still few women faces are dominating our regional and state national level politics. Instead of that, in 2008, 33% women reservation in the Lok Sabha and all state legislative assembly was introduced by the 108 constitutional amendment bill to reduce the huge gender gap. The necessity of the women reservation bill in 2008 indicates that in true sense, we failed to achieve the expected level of the women political participation as well as women empowerment even after 50 years of our Indian independence. Therefore, the above example are exceptional, and the patriarchy is still continuing in our political decision-making process. Now the questions are, has the present political gender inequality really been continuing in India since ancient times, or is it a legacy? What was the actual nature of participation and deliberative role of the women in the early Indian political organizations, especially in Bidhato? Last one is a very important question. Was the women deliberative participation really equal in true sense? Here, I will try to find out the answer of these research questions through the historical analysis. Bidhato, Sabha, Samiti, Vaidik Gana, and early Parishad, these are the significant early tribal political organization of the Vedic period. But here it should be remembered that these organizations not only would perform political activities, at the same time they had their some distributive, social, ritual, and military role also. Let me explain about Bidhato. Bidhato was an oldest political organization in the historic period. The terms Sabha and Samiti are mentioned respectively only 8 and 9 times in the Rig Veda. But the term Bidhato is mentioned 122 times. Therefore, we can easily understand that it was a most significant, earliest organization in India. According to historian Roth, the Bidhato was an assembly meant for secular, religious, and military purpose. Jaiswal thinks that the Bidhato was probably, quote, parent folk assembly, unquote. According to Ramsaran Sharma, it was a, quote, family council. So there are series of explanations regarding the nature of Bidhato. According to one mantra of 14th sukta of 3 mandala of Rig Veda, it was an assembly. It probably made laws and ordinances for the regulation of the affairs of the tribe. I am repeating this line again. It was an assembly. It probably made laws, ordinances for the regulation of the affairs of the tribe. Almost all scholar, except that this is the earliest political council or assembly of ancient India. Now, what was the nature of women participation in Bidhato? According to ancient references, in Bidhato, women members were not mute participants in the affairs of the assembly or council. I am giving some example. According to 6th mantra of 167 sukta of 1 mandala of Rig Veda, Surya, a lady, was instructed to speak to the assembled people in the Bidhato. According to 21st mantra of 1 sukta of 14 mandala of Atharva Veda, women may speak to the Bidhato in her advanced age. According to 20th mantra of 1 sukta of 14th mandala of Atharva Veda, the bride may not only figure as a housewife, but having control, she may speak to the Bidhata. I am repeating this line. The bride may not only figure as a housewife, but having control, she may speak to the Bidhata. So women who are not only housewives, she can take part in the Bidhata and may speak freely in this political assembly. According to historian Ramsaran Sharma, quote, in the deliberative function of the Bidhato, women enjoyed an equal voice with men near about 3,500 years ago in India, unquote. At the same time, we should remember that the references does not mean that women got highest preference over men. Sabha is another significant political organization. According to 3 mantra of 67 sukta of 1 mandala of Rig Veda, we see the example of woman speaker as Sabhapati, and she is described as worthy of going to the Sabha. However, the Sabha was mainly a patriarchal and aristocratic organization. Women attended in the earlier period, but the practice stopped in the later Vedic times. In connection with the Draupadi episode of Mahabharata, women do not attend the Sabha. In the later times, Matrajani Samhita indicates that women stopped to attend the Sabha. Undoubtedly, women participation was decreasing to the Sabha during later Vedic period. According to Matrajani Samhita, Aitariya Brahman, in the later Vedic period, women had nothing to do with public assembly or life, and she did not attend the Sabha. Samiti is a very popular, well-known political organization of the Vedic period. According to 5th mantra, 10th sukta of 8th mandala of Atharva Veda, shows that the women also attend Samiti. But this is not as clear as in regard to the Sabha. The participation of women remarkably decreased in Samiti. Vaidik Gano is another political organization. Gano, the technical word for the republic, is found at 46 places in the Rig Veda, at 9 places in the Atharva Veda, and several places in the Brahmana. In most cases, Gano has been interpreted in the sense of assembly or troops. There is no doubt the tribal Gano acted also as an assembly during the post-Vedic time. The Vedic Gano was probably another primitive tribal democracy combining in itself the military, distributive, religious, and social activities of early man. Further, references in the Shollo Parva of Mahabharata relating to the exploits of Skanda or Kartikeya inform us that he went to fight against Daityas accompanied by 7 Ganas of mothers. At another places, in a sections on the tribe of his mother, we come across the names of over 100 mothers who form a number of Ganas. Therefore, we see the evidence of the matriarchal Ganas. According to these mythical evidences, we may say that the Gano was also military assembly, where the participation of women as a warrior is a very significant matter. All this may lead us to suppose that women are also associated with the Vedic Gano, although no direct proof exists in the Vedas. Early Parishad, this is another important political organization of the Vedic period. We have sufficient idea about the nature of later Parishad, which is mentioned in the Arthashastra, Ashokan inscription, and Dharma Shastras. We can get some idea about the early Parishad from the Rig Veda, Atharva Veda, Mahabharata, and Puranas. The epics and Puranic references point not only to the tribal, but also to the military and partly matriarchal character of the early Parishad. In the later Vedic times, in Parishad in general, shows no trace having any woman member, but we get the reference of the term Parishadi. I'm repeating this term Parishadi in the early Parishad. The evidence on this point is not as strong as on her membership of Vidhata and Sabha. Last, in conclusion, today's gender inequality in true sense of political participation is a harsh reality. Undoubtedly, in real political participation and decision-making process, women are still surrounded by patriarchy. At the same time, it is to be remembered that this is not our historical legacy. At the very beginning, during early Rig Vedic period, the women participation was not mute. Near about 3,500 years ago, in India, in the participatory and deliberative function, the women enjoyed an equal voice with men. Vidhata was the earliest assembly of the earliest Rig Vedic period. There, where we see the gender equality in true sense. However, unfortunately, the degradation of women political participation was started from the end of early Rig Vedic period. I am repeating this line. The degradation of women political participation was started from the end of early Rig Vedic period. Women were displaced from their early political participatory and deliberative right. And it has been continuing since the end of early Vedic period. Thank you. Thank you so much. Over to Chair.
Thank you, Dr. Rai, for your nice presentation. You have started from the very good examples of female leaders, and then you switched into the pages of history, where from you have given the example from Vidhata and earlier political organizations of ancient and Aryan civilization. It's a very nice lesson to learn from your presentation, and we do hope that amidst the darkness in Indian politics, especially the representation of crisis in politics of Indian women, we can learn a lesson from history, and also we can replicate in today's politics, where in ancient India we can keep our reliance in the efficacy and in the able leadership of women. we can similarly place our confidence and reliance in our mothers and sisters and wives also. So thank you for your illuminating and very attractive presentation from the pages of history. So with this, I would like to hand over Chandan Rai for the interactive sessions to start.
Yes.
Yes, Chananda. Yes, Chananda. I'm here. Yes, Shukana and Panna madam are noting it down. I would request Shukana to please put the questions to the speakers.
Yes, good afternoon, speakers. For this session, we have got only one question. The question is from Pradeep Panda, addressed to Dr. Mukherjee. The question is, how many economically self-sufficient women actually choose to come to politics, which is more or less dirty in India? So that is the only question that we have got.
Sorry, Sukanna ma'am, sorry
Yes.
to intervene you.
Yes.
There is also another question in the chat box by Professor Chitralekha Kanjilal of Memory College. She put it question probably to Tilotkar ma'am. Kindly look down at the look at the chat box. You can get the question, or shall I read it?
Just a second. Yes, one question is there from Chitralekha Kanjilal. She asks to Professor Tilotkar. She asks that I would like to know the role of Chinese ambassador in Nepal in this regard. The question goes like this. Yes, am I audible to everybody? Hello? Hello?
Yes, yes, Chananda, can you hear her? Shubhasa? Yes. I think he's muted and he doesn't remember that he's muted. Yes, yes. Okay.
Yes. What shall I do? It is the question directed to Manasi Michel Tirokdar from Chitralekha Kanjilal. Another question, Sukanna ma'am read out. For whom I forget it.
It was for Dr. Mukherjee.
Yeah.
Dr. Joyce Mukherjee.
Yeah.
Yes.
May I?
Yeah, Dr. Mukherjee, please.
Yeah, I would like to respond to this question that how many economically self-sufficient women come to direct politics. It is, I don't have any data on this, that what is the percentage of those women who are self-sufficient and they come to power. As far as politics is dirty is concerned, it is applicable to both male and female. It's not that all male who are self-sufficient economically, they come to power. They are also find politics as dirty as women find it dirty. So the rules are applicable to both. As far as this, I told in my presentation that this is one of the reasons women don't come to politics, not being self-sufficient. They are economically dependent on male, where this is easier for male who are willing to come to politics. So that's it. I hope I answered the question.
Can the question be a little more specific, because the role of, I mean, in what exact regard was the question? If I could get a little more clarity on that.
Probably she wanted to say that woman ambassador of India from India, she is now playing very positive role in determining foreign policy or in making and arranging the foreign relations with India and China. She is seen very active in those sectors. So she wanted to know about your comment on the activism and very constructive and positive role of Chinese ambassador of India.
Yes. Well, again, the times, depending on what times the ambassador is located. I mean, in today's times, obviously, a lot of things have changed, and that is why the role have also enhanced. The comments that I was making in the presentation were about the early entrance to the diplomatic services and the problems that they face, especially till the 70s. But yes, obviously, with the changes in role and again the specific situation, especially in Nepal, and the reason for that particular effort in the direction of strengthening independence, so obviously that makes a difference. Yes, the role has been played. So I think that is all I have to say on this.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. I think probably Professor Manad, is there any question on the chat box or in YouTube chat box? If there is no question, then we have to conclude the session.
No, there was no question in the YouTube chat box, and these two questions were the Google Meet platform.
Okay. Thank you so much, the four young research scholars and Professor. And also from the very
ladies. Equal treatment to ladies in political life to be significant and compelling should begin from the grassroots level. To keep preparing and practicing the procedure of dynamic, the provincial just foundations are the best perfect structures in any case. And now we move on to the objectives of my study. The objectives of my study is classified into three. The first objective is to study about the Indian history of women's political participation, and second one, to analyze equal access of women in the decision making in order to participate in political and economic empowerment, and the third one is to suggest measures for establishment of supporting platform for women by building alliances so that they achieve higher level of energy and commitment. So for the research methodology which I use for my studies based on secondary sources of data such as newspapers, articles, magazines, etc. So first we move on to the Indian history of women's political participation. However, in India also, women have a long history of suffering and exploitation. The women remain victims of violent actions, and also they had to suffer various types of discrimination, exploitation and torture, both in nature of physical and mental, not only in the men's society, but also within the four walls of the family, thereby disturbing the equilibrium in the society. In ancient India, the women enjoyed equal status with men in all spheres of the life. The description of the god's head as half of man and half of women in the concept of Ardhanarishwara itself depicts the story of the equality of women in the Vedic period. But the status of women began to decline with the Smritis, especially Manusmriti. There was a tendency to curtail religious rights and privileges of women. Women came to be regarded in the same lines as the Shudras. Their position continued to deteriorate apart from property's right to them. And next we move
of this amendment is reservation for at least one-third membership in chairperson's positions in panchayats at all the three levels. This paper looks into the changes that are brought in the gender relations, also the socio-economic effects of political participation of women in rural political institutions. Research looks into the positive as well as negative aspects of political participation of women in rural India. The positive aspects has mainly been the political and economic empowerment of women. There has been a considerable increase in participation of women in political institutions. It has helped making women more aware of their rights and breaking the stereotype of women's role in society. It has been found that representation of women has led to less corruption in political functioning. Women are able to provide more effective and efficient local governance. Positive aspects are encouraging, but along with these, there are negative aspects too, which are mainly the nature of patriarchal society, which creates a lot of problems for the women representatives to function. The lack of literacy among the rural women also inhibits their functioning. There is the dominance of male representatives in rural political participation. There is an unequal socio-economic relationship between men and women in rural India, where the social and economic status of women is lower as compared to men. These are a pertinent factor which had to be dealt with in order to make political decentralization more participatory. A more effective way of making women politically empowered is to bring an equilibrium status of women in socio-economic aspects with respect to men, for which access to education and health facilities
to women are vital. It has been seen that the political participation of women in rural areas is much larger than as compared to Parliament of India. Like there are states like Jharkhand, Rajasthan, Uttarakhand, and also other where political participation is more than 50% in Panchayat Raj institutions. But this has also been found that most of the women that participate in these institutions are from the wealthy class and also from the upper classes. So the number of people representing the lower classes and from the weaker sections are much lower. So it has come to the notice that the main reason is that lack of access to awareness and social economic means to the lower classes. So in order to improve the political participation, we have to also look the social and economic means of the people are increased in the rural India. These are the main facts which are to present. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. Your paper is good. Dr. Subhash, if you have any observation.
Okay, that was a very nice presentation within the time limit.
Yeah.
If time permits, then we can hear you more.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's a very good presentation. And one request to all the paper presenter in this session: please do not leave the session because questions may be there for you. So keep here constantly and keep close watch on the chat box if there is any questions for you. We will also taking note of the questions in the chat box, but you too.
And Dr.
So with this, Devkumar.
Yeah. And Dr. Subhash Singho, you know that I don't consider this to be question because this is not a question hour. You know, this is a point of discussion. You know, if there is no discussion in the seminar is fruitless.
Yes, agree with.
Yeah. So please be with us. So we proceed to Dr. Kiran Dwivedi ji. You are not connected, perhaps. Payal Saha, scholar, political science, University of Guruvanga. Payal Saha.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Sir, you're hearing me?
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you, sir. Good evening, my respected teachers and all participants. My topic is participation of rural women in politics. Today, we are living in the 21st century. Today's people are use the new kind of gadget like smartphone, tab, etc. And recently, 5G has been in India. The government wants to make digital India seems that our country is easily different. So, society is why that
Payal, check your connection. Check your connection. It is flickering. We can't hear you. Yes. Now it is totally paused.
Hello?
Check your connection.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello,
Yes, now
sir.
we can hear.
Are you hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, sir.
Continue.
Even after 7 decades of independence, women go to the Supreme Court for this. In a country, political sector is mostly influenced by male domination. They, like politics, is their own subject. Although girls of the city have qualified, the lives of in rural areas are still confined within walls. The lives of these players are drawing darkness of literacy. In this situation, participation in politics is very difficult, especially in case of rural women. The life of rural people in our country is very different. Their culture is different and discrimination is much more common in rural places. Patriarchal mentality is more prevalent in rural areas. Men of the house control the lives of women and treat them like themselves. In most of the cases, it is seen that the girls are stopped from studying in the middle. Result, they suffer in illiteracy. And illiteracy is a big barrier to women's participation in politics. Because illiteracy limits the ability of women to understand the political system and issues. The low level of womanity inequalities. But if some rural girls are rated, they are politics. Women also lack leadership experience due to the fact they are burdened with household duties. The burden of is a significant reason why many Indian women, especially rural women, do not participate in politics. It guarantees rural rights to women, assuring them the equal opportunity. Indian government adopted decentralized policy for development through democratic institutions as Panchayat Raj system. Panchayat is an important institution for women participation in politics. Democratic system at grassroots levels. The 73rd and 74th Constitutional Amendment Act 1992 ensure one-third of the total seats for women of all local bodies in rural and urban areas. Further, Union Cabinet approved the proposal for moving an official amendment to the Constitution Bill 2009 for ensuring reservation for women in local self-government from one-third to 50%. These amendments are also increase women participation in local self-government and grassroots democracy. It is true that the participation of rural women in politics increased day by day, but which women are elected, their decisions is not their own. They act as a proxy candidate. They acted merely as a mouthpiece of their male family members because men cannot get this reservation seat positions. These power-hungry men use women to get these positions and control them and treat them like themselves. In this way, women's moral is broken and they are afraid to join politics. One another bill, that is Women's Reservation Bill, was introduced by the UPA government in May 2008, passed by Rajya Sabha in March 2010, but still awaits in the Lok Sabha. In 2012, Mulayam Singh Yadav said about this bill, remember, only wives and daughters of affluent families can benefit from the Women's Reservation Bill. Our rural women cannot get elected as MPs because they are not attractive. So, lack of importance to the political parties, negative attitudes of political leaders, another essential barriers for women's empowerment and women participating in politics, political process and local politics. And the conclusion is, in India, 49% of the total population is approximately women. Yet, the voice of the half of the total population has been ignored since independence until now. No law is required to be enacted to give space to the women in the democratic setup. If each political party sincerely and honestly gives the party portfolio to women, I believe that no law will require for women representatives from local level to parliament. And the mentality of the difference between a boy and every one of our homes First of all, we have to get rid of this mentality in our home. Then that fight for girls will be successful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Payal. Thank you for your good presentation. And Payal,
Yes, sir.
you told that in the rural scenario, there is a male domination. There is a male domination over the women, over the women's participation. Then, but their participation is not qualitative, right? So here, do you think for this domination, for their lack of qualitative participation, only male domination is the root cause, or the women or the women's mental setup is partly plays a role? Do the women in rural areas, do the women in the rural areas want to participate?
Yes, sir. Yes, the donation for মানে শুধুমাত্র মানে পুরুষতান্ত্রিক সমাজ এক্ষেত্রে তাই নয়, এখানে মহিলাদের নিজস্ব যে মানসিকতা, তাদের পিছিয়ে পড়া, তাদের লজ্জা, তাদের যে নিজস্ব মনোভাব, হ্যাঁ, সেই সমস্ত প্রত্যেকটা বিষয় এখানে দায়ী এই বিষয়টার জন্য। কিন্তু তারা আজকে নিজেরাই মেন্টাল সেটার, তারা নিজেরাই নিজেদেরকে এগিয়ে চায় না পলিটিক্যাল সেক্টরের দিকে।
গুড গুড, শুনতে যাচ্ছিলাম। সুভাষ।
ওকে,
Payal, my humble suggestions or advice to you that you have a very negative perspective. I would like to request you to see the positive sides of the reservation and the representation in politics. When a person, when a woman or a girl, normally, when a woman is elected in any panchayat bodies, can you?
Sir?
Yes,
sir. Very good evening to everyone. Here I am.
Okay.
Can I proceed, sir?
Proceed, please.
Very good evening, everyone. Here I am going to present my paper titled Political Participation of Women in Assam, especially Nagaon district. Here I am going to define what is political participation. Political participation generally refers to the voluntary activities of women, voluntary activities of members of a society in the selection of rulers and formation of public policy. The International Encyclopedia of Social Science defined political participation as the by which consent is granted or withdrawn in a democracy and rulers are made accountable to the rule. This political participation includes all the political activities like participation in the election process as voters and candidates, in political parties as workers, and in the decision-making process as representatives and executives. My main objective of my paper is to study the political participation of women in LSC elections in Nagaon as voters, to study the participation of women in politics in compared to male, to study the participation of women in freedom movement at Nagaon district. To present the political participation of women in Assam. Political participation of women in Assam, like other parts of India, began in a very miniature form since the freedom movement. In 1921, Mahatma Gandhi visited Assam, and after his visit, the freedom movement in Assam reached a new light. The women also participated in a freedom movement very highly. The women like Chandraprabha Saikia dynamic role in the freedom movement in Assam. They participated in various freedom movements, disobedience movement, Quit India movement, non-corporate movement, etc. Various mass movements also participated. Socialist historians, called the Brahma historians, movement as a woman movement because women participated highly in that movement. My main topic is participation of women in political participation of women in Nagaur district. They are trying to in the Indian state of Assam, also known as Middle Assam. According to 2011, the total population of Nagaur district is 8,23,708. District has 8 legislative assembly constituencies and 2 Lok Sabha assembly constituencies, it is Kolhapur and parliamentary constituency. Nagaur district also witnessed the emergence of various mass movements. Among the various mass movements in the Quit India movement, women of Nagaur district actively participated. Bhuvneshwar Suppanami was one of the prominent martyrs of the Quit India movement from revolt. In that district, girls like Pitrani Soikia and Dagavati Bora worked for the security of the under male workers. Women like Kiran Mal, the independence of India. In this paper, I find that the women participated in freedom movement very highly, but their participation is very low. Here are some figures regarding women participations as voters in Nagaur district. Here are some figures of women participations in 1990.
and also in India, only independent participated in voting runs public spheres, private spheres, and political parties at lower levels more than men. Central government scheme for women, national policies for empowerment.
and play their role. By including them in the panchayat system, they have become economically supported as well as self-development, developed through policy making and decision making. In social life, and their dignity has increased, and ordinary people are applying to them to solve any problem to the society. They can be seen in any event of the society, and they have undoubtedly been empowered. In many cases, women members discuss women's legal issues naturally. This has raised awareness among ordinary women in the village about their rights, despite the controversy surrounding women participation. It can be said that women's participation has increased women's people awareness. Research by the state panchayat and development agencies has shown that in the current situation, women have played an important role in the formation of village self-help group in the Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan project, protecting the health of children, maternal health and nutrition, monitoring integrated child development project, old age pension project, Pradhan Mantri Griho Awas Yojana, Pulse Polio program. At the gram system has enabled the proper implementation of this project. Various studies have also shown that the ordinary women in the village can freely discuss their family and physical problems with female members. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, thank you. Good effort. Tried well. Paper is good. Subhash. If you do have any observation, if you do have any
Sir,
offer,
it's a very good attempt from
So, Pujasi Arya, you are present?
Pujam Singh Arya. I think Pujan is not present.
Yes, I think is not present. And next presenter is Tanvir Sahanwaz, Assistant Professor, Department of English, Rishi Bankim Chandra College, West Bengal.
Sir, I'm here. Can you hear me, sir?
Yeah.
Tanvir Sahanwaz.
Yes. Tanvir Sahanwaz. Yes. Sir, yes, sir. Start. You complete within 5 minutes. Will be very interesting. I see that you are from another extra time. So you complete within 5 minutes. Just highlight your main point. Right? Just start.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, sir. Good evening, ma'am. I am Tanvir Sahanwaz, Assistant Professor from Rishi Bankim Chandra College, and I am from Malda district, and I was a student of Malda College. Today, I will present my paper on exploring feminism, resilience, and insight into Marjani Satrapi novel Persepolis. Actually, it is a graphic novel written by Marjani Satrapi, Iranian woman novelist. The significant participation of women in countrywide, regional, and community group leadership roles has turned out to be a crucial awareness on global improvement approach. Yet, some can also ask why it matters if women come to be political leaders, administrators, elected legislators, or civil social workers. Why does the society need more potential women engaged in all factors of the political proceedings? Women's
minorities. It is also said that this bill is against the principle of equality. Conclusion. I can conclude that the successful passing of this bill would encourage the women to gradually shoulder responsibilities in the legislative assemblies and in the parliament. But men in the political structure still now refuse to acknowledge the social justice and gender justice. If we keep most of the women outside the political system, then it would not. Effectiveness of women reservation depends on socio-political order of the country. Though it is evident that most of the women representatives are acted as a proxy women in democratic bodies and silent spectators in the different socio-political issues. Therefore, if the women reservation bill is passed in the parliament, then it may not be possible to say that women would fulfill the major objectives of this. Also believed that more women's access will enhance the quality of politics. May be reconstructed our society and opened up new opportunities for making a gender-inclusive society in the near future. Though achieving these objectives requires collaborative efforts. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for good presentation. Informative, and I think it is prepared on the basis of secondary data also, secondary data only. Yes, secondary data only. And you rightly mentioned here that reservation is very necessary to empowerment of women in parliament. I think it is not only parliament, it also in the legislature, state legislature. Actually, if we see the world scenario, we find that presently Rwanda, where 61% representation are come from women front, and the cabinet of Rwanda dominated by women. 52% cabinet ministers are from women, and very interestingly, UK and UK, I think UK and other some European countries also follow this route. But in the case of India, where we introduced reservation of women in local government since 1992, but till date, we are not accept reservation of women in parliament and state legislation. This is very
very conflicting issue, I think. But able to strengthen women in locally, in rurally, in locally in urban areas. So it is right if reservation in a limited way to provide the the parliament and also state legislation and in limited way reservation. I think one of the uh, and I just suggest you frame your title, the question of women reservation in Indian Parliament in the context of women empowerment. Just if you want to work on this title, just reframe your title, the question of women reservation in Indian legislation. I think, and then the study of or study of or case study of you include this subtitle. So I will I think it will be better. And now I offer to my co-chair Tilottama ma'am. Please share your observation to Professor Dr. Sundip Pal.
So I reserve my opinion, my comments, as we are running very late. Let us first the paper presentations be over and finally have a discussion of 5 minutes.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
sir?
yes, yes.
Okay.
So I call the next presenter, Dr. Shubhamay Patra, Sector 1, Sanskrit, Prabhat Kumar College, Kontai, West Bengal. If you are present, please, Prabhat Kumar, right? Shubhamay Pahari, right? Shubhamay Pahari, are you present? Shubhamay Pahari? To next presenter, Dalia Haldar. Dalia Haldar, are you present? Dalia Haldar?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Dalia, you are a research scholar, political science, Kalyan University, West Bengal. Your topic is land and women empowerment, a study of Singur. You present your presentation. Firstly, it's in your research question, and if you maintain any methodological framework, and then what is your finding? So start your presentation.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thank you. Good evening, sir. My paper title is Land, a Study of Shingur. Just stipulation of time, I used 4 points to clarify my papers. Number 1, empowerment and women empowerment, both are important as well as state politics. And number 2, prominently used in her election campaign and promised the land losers to return back the land. After election, her first cabinet decision as chief minister was to return the said land to the unwilling farmers by enacting the Shingur Land Rehabilitation and Development Bill 2011. This kind of the scenario is the base of women empowerment in West Bengal. That's all, sir. Thank you once again to the organizing committee.
Thanks to Dalia for finished with the short time, within time, not
Sir,
short
can
time.
you see me?
Yes, yes, sir. Yeah. And you present your paper in a dynamic way and in a framed way, so thanks to you. And yes, it is very right. Land and women empowerment. This is very related matter. Without one of the men is land.